Good evening. I'm going to reconvene open session, and it is 6:45. Someone got a phone? I think it's 6:45. This is the Board of Education meeting for PVPUSD, and let's start with our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so number one, E, report of board action taken in closed session. The board agreed to reject claim 1906982. The board voted as follows: Suzanne Seymour, yes; Richard Phillips, yes; Megan Crawford, yes; Linda Reed, yes; Matthew Brock, yes. Passed 5-0. May I get an approval of the agenda?
So before you move that, I guess I'd like to modify the agenda by removing item Q2D, the overnight field trip of the academic decathlon finals, because the sponsor has canceled that event.
Okay, so we will remove Q2D from the consent agenda. So with that modification, do I have a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Okay, public communications. Public comment on non-agenda items. The public will be given the opportunity to address the board at this time on topics not listed on this agenda. Remarks shall be limited to 3 minutes per person. The board reserves the right to limit public comment beyond a total of 15 minutes per agenda item. The board cannot engage in public discussion during this portion of the agenda due to the Ralph M. Brown Act. There are a few comments right now. These yellow cards are in the back table, so if you have a topic that you want to speak to that's not actually on this agenda, this would be the opportunity to do that. In the back of the room, on the table, there's a binder that has the entire agenda for tonight. Every attachment that we're going to talk to is in that binder, so you can find all of the information in the back of the table if you so choose to look at it. In a minute, we're going to talk about open session items. You can choose to talk about an open session item during unagendized or during the topic when it comes up. So right now, if we, without further ado, I will call the people who are going to speak on the unagendized items. So Vincent Goshi, just come to that podium, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Vince Goshi. I'm a retired aerospace engineer. I live in the Eastview section of Rancho Palos Verdes. Although I was not able to vote on Measure PV, I was very much aware of community discussions about this as a participant on Nextdoor. I want to give a shout out to Mr. Wayne Dempsey, who did an initial post that got all the people involved in the Nextdoor discussions. His post was my first glimpse of what the measure was about. That prompted me to learn more, so I started searching for documents on the web myself. My purpose tonight is to provide the board with information on community discussions that occurred on Nextdoor prior to the vote and reveal what major concerns residents had with supporting the measure as it was presented. I would say many of the Nextdoor participants were supportive of making necessary improvements to the schools. At the same time, proportionally consistent with the actual votes, most had issues with voting yes on this bond measure. I will go through the major things that the participants were saying. First, a lot of people were hesitant to vote yes on what they perceived was a very large bond measure, $386 million with a cost of $800 million over 30 years. I read as much district materials as I could. It appeared to me the district needs were actually greater than $387 million, and that this had been whittled down as much as possible. But it was still large by PVP standards, and the substantiation and supporting material for such a size bond seemed lacking. Seismic retrofitting of the two main classrooms at Penn High was an issue. The DLR assessment in 2016 showed retrofitting of these classrooms could be done for about $1 million. The FAC proposed replacing these classrooms at a cost estimate of about $48 million, but the FAC cited recent changes to the DSA code for schools as the reason. But finding the DSA code change was impossible, and there was no documentation describing why and what had to be done that drove retrofitting these Penn High classrooms to such a high cost. To vote yes, one had to take this on faith. A lot of people were not willing to do that. Another area was air conditioning, probably because it was expensive, and in some places on the peninsula, it is not needed a lot of the time. I live in the Eastview, and believe me, I totally sympathize with the teachers and students who want air conditioning. This is an area where some people in the next door discussions had expertise. They could not find documentation to corroborate estimates for air conditioning in the measure, leaving great uncertainty among participants. I came here not to criticize, but to make the board aware of how the community saw the measure based on how it was presented and what documentation was readily available. I believe it's presented well. No's could be turned into yeses. People want our kids and teachers to be safe, secure, and comfortable. Getting our facilities upgraded will attract better teachers, which in turn will improve learning. I would guess over 100 people participated in next door discussions on the measure. On the next bond measure, the board should, as a minimum, reach out to this group and get them briefed and on board. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay, the next speaker then is Len Lye.
I'm speaking on the same issue. I should be home grading papers, but I'm here instead. I'm Len Lye, a 30-year-plus resident of the district, and I'm in my 15th year of teaching at Peninsula High. I'm here to talk about Measure PV, which I supported, as did the Superintendent Board, PVFA, CSEA, and many others. I appreciate the efforts of all, but feel better district outreach beyond yard signs, mailers, and phone banks was needed, especially outreach by district leaders to those who raised concerns like the ones you heard, because I saw those same ones. Even though I don't necessarily support that point of view, I understood it, that it was raised. But here we are faced with challenges in the face of dramatic state underfunding, essentially empty capital improvement funds, and the prospects of patching old buildings with expensive bubblegum and Band-Aids by raiding the general fund, which I see ahead. Read that as attempts to shift money that otherwise would be used for teachers. Everything has to be on the table now unless we can get another bond issue approved for capital improvements, and even then it will be tough. However, if a smaller bond issue is proposed and passed, or one that's better supported with information, it's better than nothing. In the face of these funding challenges, we have to put lots of items on the table other than just teacher and staff raises. For example, we need to look at excessive reserves, school site consolidation, which is widely reviled, I know, but might be necessary given the number of structures that we have to maintain and the administration of each. And there's a number of other things that I can mention. If the target becomes teachers and raises, which I know you try not to do, but it always ends up that way because that's where the money is, then I will tell young, bright teachers, run, don't walk, to other districts that pay more or are in areas of lower cost of living, especially in the midst of a statewide and national teacher shortage. Also, since opponents won the vote by a large margin, we need to embrace and include them. I was glad that the prior speaker was here tonight, because in the script that I've written, I say, also misinformation continues to circulate. By the way, somebody said Palos Verdes Peninsula Association of Realtors did not support this bond. So I emailed it and I said, did you or didn't you? They said, of course we did. Yet somebody was saying, oh, this is lies about who's supporting the bond issue. It's only the developers. Not true. And I found the same thing about the mitigation of $1 million in that 2016 report versus the $50 million to tear down and replace the buildings, and a desire for more information on that, which I think is natural. So meanwhile, though, what do we have? The report also said, all the identified deficiencies are major structural irregularities and pose a serious collapse hazard, sounds bad to me, if they are not mitigated. So, in any case, every day we delay, we play Russian roulette with the lives of our sons, daughters, and school staff, hoping that we won't have a major seismic event in earthquake country, and that's simply unacceptable.
Thank you. Okay, this is the final call for speakers for unagendized items. So the last speaker we have now is Silvia Misma. No. No. That's why that's why this comment was for the unagendized.
Thank you. I wanted to thank the school district and the board for taking a step in the right direction this afternoon with the new Stage Scenario 2 announcement an hour or 2 hours ago. I definitely believe that it is the board's jurisdiction and responsibility as our elected representatives to direct the staff how to approach this public health issue. Dr. Turnus asked for it at the beginning of yesterday's session. He said, how do you want us to deal with this? And my answer to that is to saying early, fast, aggressive, and assertive so that we minimize exposure, because we don't know, as many of the board members mentioned yesterday, a lot of numbers or percentages on effects, counter effects, long-lasting damage to lungs, et cetera. We don't know for a fact. So I ask you please to act early and assertively to assess, as prevention is worth a pound of cure, and it definitely is your responsibility to do that and to tell the district, especially when they're asking for that direction from you. The policy that you let out today is a good step in the right direction. However, it doesn't address students at all. It doesn't address students that have family members who travel quite a bit. It was pointed out yesterday that we have lots of travelers in this district, businessmen and women who travel, family members who travel. We are very, very exposed to the communities that are exposed to this risk, as well as across the county. It's on either side of us, LA and Long Beach. We are not isolated here. We are very heavily involved. There's also not a policy that we need to address. Should students or staff decide to voluntarily, at no risk and release to the district, decide to go on trips and expose themselves to the petri dishes of airplanes and airports, then they want to come back into the population of school? No, I think they should consider staying home for 2 weeks and making sure that they were not exposed. We have Port Authority people in Florida and in other places that have been exposed already and been treating travelers for several weeks. Our policies don't address the unsymptomatic, the non-symptomatic patients who for 2 weeks have been exposing others. And I'm very glad to see you have the chairs farther apart, 3 to 6 feet, 6 feet being a better distance, because when we speak, we are releasing little tiny droplets that have potential to be coronavirus droplets or flu, and flu is much more prevalent right now. We're not wiping down surfaces. We're not wiping down doorways. At the elementary level, you can keep things by classes. This thing's keep things by classrooms. At the high school level, our children are changing classrooms 6 times a day. With 35 students per day, that's an exponential number of exposures, because then I understand the teachers are not allowed and nobody's allowed to spray the air with Lysol, and they're not wiping down every surface. So I'm hoping the general guidelines say lots of air, open doors and windows, teach outside when you can. It's pretty day-to-day. Hopefully it won't rain the next few weeks. I would like staff to be directed and to note that if they can do any of these things, it would be very helpful. So I thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we are moving to G2, and that is the public comment on open session agenda items. Again, the card is the same, and you would just fill the card out for the agenda item that you would like to speak to. And I will call those as we get to that agenda item. You'll be given the opportunity to address the board during each agenda item. Remarks will be limited to 3 minutes per person. The board reserves the right to limit public comment beyond a total of 15 minutes per agenda item. Okay, so now can I get approval of the minutes from February 26th?
Move to approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, second?
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Board President announcements. Tonight's Board of Education meeting is being recorded and live streamed via a link on the district website. PVPUSD is currently enrolling new students for the 2021 school year. For details about new student enrollment at all grade levels, please visit the district website at pvpusd.net. The District Peninsula Education Foundation and the Palos Verdes Peninsula Council of PTAs will be hosting a Parent Wellness Symposium focusing on student health, wellness, and connectedness on Saturday, March 21, 2020, from 8:30 to noon at Palos Verdes High School. Additional information will be shared with parents and posted on the district website. The district's Kids Corner program is offering a spring break day camp for elementary school students. The camp will be at Soleado and is open from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. For more information is available on the district website. Okay, now moving on to J, report of our student board members. Okay, Lucy, would you like to lead us in your first report?
Good evening, board. Dr. Chernis, thank you for having me. We've been busy over at PV High with all sorts of events and activities, including a presentation hosted by the College and Career Center last week for their College Toolkit series featuring representatives from a variety of national universities. Also last week, a group of PVHS students traveled to Scrock to tour their facilities and discover more about the programs offered. Our wonderful staff battled the students in their annual comedy sports show. The latest issue of the school newspaper, The Point, was released, and the PTSA sponsored Staff Appreciation Week to show our staff how thankful we are for all of their hard work. A special shout-out goes out to Abby Miyamoto, David Miyamoto, and Jason Shimiyama for their work with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. These Sea Kings were recently recognized at the Society's Gala for raising over $85,000. This past weekend, a group of delegates traveled to UC Berkeley to participate in the university's annual Model United Nations Conference. Students had the opportunity to tour the beautiful city of San Francisco, as well as partake in meaningful discussions concerning pressing world issues. We've had a busy couple of weeks for spring sports with baseball victories over Banning and Santa Monica, boys lacrosse victories over Agora and Harvard Westlake, and girls lacrosse winning the Rose Bowl Jamboree Tournament. Boys volleyball beat Sage Creek and Burroughs, track and field beat El Segundo and Hawthorne, and PV Surf took home a victory over Torrance and Bishop Montgomery. Our girls soccer team competed in the CIF regional competition, beating Mount Carmel in the first round before losing to Chaminade in overtime. Congratulations to all of our athletes for all of their hard work and dedication. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Suraj, would you like to give us your report?
Good evening, board and everyone, and thank you for having me. Amid some pretty strange global conditions, Peninsula continues to stride with optimism. First, congratulations to our newly elected ASB and class officers for the year of 2020-2021. These officers take on the responsibility of organizing many of the entertaining and educational events happening campus-wide, from homecoming to class comps. We look forward to their leadership. In sports news, our girls basketball team was extremely successful in their historic run for the State Division III championship. Unfortunately, they faced a difficult game against Paloma Valley High School last night at home with a very close loss. We are extremely proud of their achievement and wish them more than luck in the future years. In other news, the drama group's musical comedy Freaky Friday is out in theaters. This play, based on the novel by Mary Rogers, is the culmination of our students' hard work for the past few months. In the story, when an overworked mother and her teenage daughter magically swap bodies, they have just one day to put things right again before the mom's wedding. I've heard only glowing compliments and actually plan to see this weekend. Now, in addition, students from our world language courses have been performing each day at lunch to celebrate World Language Week. From togas, sword fights, and the story of Homer's Odyssey with the Latin classes, to stunning salsa dancing with the Spanish classes, these performances are always a lot of fun. Finally, a special congratulation goes out to our speech team for their success at the state qualifiers. Among our outstanding students, Amanda Kalajian earned the league champion in original oratory, and Bonnie Kwan and Alan Shee earned league champion in duo interpretation. With the choir concert and Technology Student Association competition just around the corner, Peninsula students are thrilled for upcoming events. Thank you, and this concludes my report.
Thank you. Now, you both know that you are welcome to stay as long as you would like, and you are welcome to speak to any item, and you are a full member of this board, so you do not need to wait. If I don't happen to look up and you want to say something, please feel free to speak up, okay? And you can leave whenever you would like also. We don't have a super long agenda, so we'll see how it goes. I should probably not have said that because I think I might have jinxed us, but I say that most nights. I try. Okay, so moving right along, then we have K, a report of Palos Verdes Faculty Association Leadership. Cece.
Good evening. Sorry I wasn't able to be here yesterday. We were having our own rep council meeting at the same time. So I would like to start with some good news, because I think we could all use some good news. Our shout outs for today at Mirror Est, Ann Keller, Katie Reeder, and Stephen Ide. These teachers do an excellent job running the Student of the Month program at Mirror Est. They send out surveys, sign cards, organize the lunch, and invite the parents 10 times a year for Student of the Month. So shout out to those teachers at Mirror Est. At Ridgecrest, Jennifer MacArthur. Jennifer brings literature to life in the classroom through her love of theater. Jennifer masterfully integrates theater into her curriculum, giving students hands-on experience with literature, enriching their experience with text that may not be as engaging otherwise. So Jennifer MacArthur is a rockin' Raider teacher. And last, I have another teacher from Mirror Est, for Campbell Nimick. He took 3 teams to compete in the state finals for the next robotics tournament in San Diego. Not sure if any of the teams went through to Worlds, but still, total labor of love, lots of extra hours put into this endeavor. So shout out to him. Of course, the topic of the day and the topic of the week is COVID-19. I don't know that I've ever gotten more text messages in one day as I have today on this particular topic. So it's obviously very fluid, and it's something that we are really trying to get a handle of and manage misinformation, because as you all know, there's lots of misinformation out there. So on the receiving end, obviously our concern is for teachers and for student safety. Principals have been reaching out to teachers, engaging where we're at with our comfort level with technology and where we're at for alternate methods of delivering information, delivering curriculum, which depends on time and access. And obviously, this is so fluid. I know I've never experienced anything like this before. We're not sure if this is going to happen and what access to material will have and how much notice, which would mean depending on how teachers are prepared. Are they talking about providing packets? Are we talking about access to Wi-Fi? Do students need reading materials? So these are all questions that we're kind of working through, but we appreciate the professional discretion to be able to make those decisions as teachers depending on grade level and school site, because as you know, high school teachers are going to have different expectations than elementary school teachers. I will tell you anecdotally, my 3rd graders are ready. I introduced them to Office 365 and made the good fortune or bad fortune of showing them email, and mine quickly blew up. I had about 100 emails with emojis and GIFs, and so they are ready. And I'll be honest with you, it was a great conversation to say with the littles, we're prepared. When we have an earthquake, we're prepared. When we have a disaster drill, these are the reasons we go through the steps. So they were really calm and really cool, and I even got some good parent feedback as to, okay, this is not that big of a deal. We're going to be fine. We're going to get through this. So just wanted to let you know that that's coming down the pipe, and we're just, like I said, as you guys know, it's a day-to-day fluid situation. Until then, we are using lots of hand sanitizer and staying clean and washing everything and using social distancing. So that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is it okay? I just wanted to thank Cece and some of her teachers, if that would be appropriate to do at this time really quickly.
Sure.
Is that okay? Cece, I just wanted to thank you regarding your efforts for Measure PV and being a PVFA leader for that. And there were a few teachers, I think, who didn't get it, who thought that somehow no money going to teachers was a post they should like, because I don't think they really understood it. But I just wanted to thank, if I could, shout out to a few teachers that really went the extra mile. Samantha Weiss at Ridgecrest, who held up signs in front of her school in the morning. Logan Tutel at Peninsula High School, who gathered people in her home and hosted coffees multiple times. Stephanie O'Brien at Dapple Gray, who was out canvassing with her parents, and Barbara Ferraro at PV High School, who's an elected official and publicly endorsed the bond at some political risk to herself. Social media posts and sending mass emails to fellow parents: June Choi at Peninsula, Nicole Crack at Ridgecrest, Heidi Mayer at Silver Spur, Susan Pollock at Peninsula, Brian Shapiro at PV High, and Kurt Hay at PVIS. So I just wanted to publicly thank those teachers, because they spent a lot of their personal time in support of our students and our facilities measure. So thank you.
Okay, so do we have anybody from CSEA to speak this evening? I don't think we do. Okay, we do not. All right, then we are moving to report of our superintendent. He is going to give us his mid-year State of the District report.
Thank you, President Seymour, members of the school board. I'm very excited to present the State of the District report tonight. So we're going to get it going here. While we are setting up, I want to publicly acknowledge my team for their work this week. Deputy Superintendent Bahadur Singh has been working 24/7, providing information and updates to our families, updating our district website, and is actually out sick and still working from home today. So I want to publicly thank him. I want to thank Dr. Butler and your staff for working tirelessly to keep our schools clean and safe. Dr. Gatanda for working with teachers and principals to create systems that we've never done before and trying to prepare for worst case scenarios on how do we deliver instruction. And Dr. Horvath for supporting our employees and trying to do everything we can. So just know you're in good hands. We're working very hard to support our school sites. So about 7 years ago, I was first day on the job as superintendent, and one of my now close friends and former superintendent, Lauren Kleinrock in San Marino, who was stepping down at the time, was in my office the first day I arrived. And one of the things he said that still resonates was, he said, Alex, just remember, you don't get paid to make the easy decisions. You get paid to make the hard decisions. And that is so true. And some of the decisions that we're going to be making in the next several years are going to be hard decisions. But they're going to be extremely important and impactful. So what I'd like to do now is go through this presentation. I'm going to, President Seymour, what I'm recommending is to just go through section by section, and then stopping at the end of each section and asking the board to discuss, question, deliberate, rather than waiting until the very end, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. Is this presentation in the back on the table?
The presentation's in the back.
Okay,
What you have here is pieces of the presentation pulled out, the recommendations in every section, which I'll go through for brevity for the PowerPoint's sake.
So anyone in the room can go pick up the copy in the back. Anybody at home watching can look on the district agenda, click on the link, and find the presentation there. Thank you.
So what you have here are the 7 expectations, really goals that I set forth with the school district, with the school board when I started about a year and a half ago. So each one of these are important and very different in what they're referencing. The first is that all students are physically and emotionally safe at school and healthy at school. Next is that all of our students are proficient or advanced in English, language arts, and mathematics. And as I've mentioned in the past, we have about a quarter of our kids that aren't there yet. All of our students will have an opportunity for high-quality academic instruction. Our district will be leaders in education, technology, computer science, and STEM. Our teachers are to be the best trained and supported workforce in the state. Our district will be at the forefront of innovation through the establishment of community partnerships and projects. And the PVPUSD will be the #1 district in the state of California using multiple measures of success. So with respect to the physical safety of our students, in light of the fact that Measure PDV did not pass, we now need to really take a deep dive into the structural safety of our facilities and prioritize. So my recommendations are, first and foremost, to conduct a comprehensive structural engineering study of classrooms and buildings to determine their level of safety. And I've asked Dr. Butler to prepare an RFP and or RFQ for April to solicit firms that can come and open up walls, look at our structural buildings such as the Penn buildings, H&S. Prioritize needs and develop a plan to address these needs, both in the short term and the long term, based on the information we get. Determine costs and possible funding sources to address these needs. Determine whether certain facilities need to be removed, retrofitted, or rebuilt. Explore district-wide enrollment trends to determine whether schools need to be reconfigured. Conduct a comprehensive site utilities needs assessment. As you recall, the site utilities was another top priority as recommended from the Facilities Advisory Committee and part of the Measure PV measure. So to determine the lifespan of the current equipment and a timeline for replacement. So my recommendation is to prioritize the needs and develop a plan to address these needs and to determine costs and possible funding sources to address these needs. And so these are the near-term recommendations for the physical safety, the structural safety for our students. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to the board for any questions or comments.
Okay.
I'll just ask a quick question, if that's okay.
Yep.
So you're talking about two different needs assessments that you would like to do, one structural and one utilities-based. What's the rough cost of something like that? Do we have any idea?
No, I don't at this time.
Okay.
I thought in the past we had talked about this and it was going to be maybe, I think we discussed this, something like October, maybe September, when we were discussing the FAC results. Because I remember Brock, I had suggested that we do a seismic study of every single campus. And was at that time, $150,000, something like that, of dollars. Maybe I got that from the FAC report. I don't remember. So this may be more comprehensive than just seismic.
My guess is going to be this will be probably between $300,000 and $500,000 to do both of these.
I will say this was brought up by the FAC in some of our meetings as a potential, next step. So this isn't the first time that it's been discussed.
Right. Had we passed the bond, we would be doing this step first to determine what to do next. So based upon actual results as opposed to estimates based upon when you can't see through walls because we haven't opened up walls.
Right. And the idea was that, we wanted to see where we would be after the bond vote before actually going forward with this. Because what we didn't want to do was spend $300,000 to $500,000 without really knowing how things were going to turn out. Now it might end up that we have to spend that amount, but what we would have done is a more extensive plan that would have looked at a lot more things, and we would have been able to save money by, if the bond had passed, we would have been able to do a much more comprehensive rather than just looking at seismic and site utilities, and we would have had some cost savings there.
Well, I think the other important thing to recognize is we now are operating under the assumption that we have limited funds. And so where before we could have assumed that we would replace many of the site utilities, I think now we need to see what are the critical site utilities at the specific schools that are priority one, recognizing we have limited funds.
And can we get a capacity for each school? So can we get numbers as to how many students each school can support and how many students are currently there?
Yes, that was part of the facilities master plan, I believe, that did that back in 2017, so I can pull that back out and then we'll add in where we are now.
Updated to where we're at and what our projections are for next year.
Especially if we have campuses that, say, have removed an old portable classroom or two that are no longer functional. So maybe since 2017, some of the numbers are slightly different.
Right, and I would actually like to see, a breakdown, please, of where the portables are. How many students are being served by those portables versus a brick and mortar? Just so that as we're moving forward, we know, my goal would be that since these portables are 40 years old, that we're starting to move students where possible into brick and mortar versus,
I think that's laudable, but I don't see how we do that without the bond, right? Because I think that's what that would require.
Well, we could.
I guess what I'm wondering is, because we do have very limited resources, So do we need to really do this system-wide, or can we prioritize where we, the scope, can we limit the scope? Because anecdotally, I'm not an expert on the seismic reports. I haven't gone through them, but, anecdotally, right here is that Miralles, Ridgecrest, Penn are the three campuses where that are at the higher seismic risk. So could we just start with them, for example, on the structural engineering study? And then I don't know, in terms of the site utilities, where the greatest needs are, but can we prioritize, a certain set of campuses for the site utilities assessment, and likewise limit that scope? Because we're just not going to have enough money to do everything that needs to be done if we're impacting the general fund in order to make these repairs. So why spend
Well, Rick, I would suggest that we do it for every site, because then we know which site, are stronger or more viable long-term than others.
That's the right thing to do eventually. But are we, if we're trying to just scope what we can do in the near term, let's try and figure out.
I don't think we are. We know we can't do most of this work in the near term. I mean, virtually none of this we can do in the near term if it's as large as any of the projects that we were just discussing, right? So going and fixing the most needy school with plumbing, perhaps, yes, we can do that, right? But we're not going to replace all plumbing at all elementary schools,
right,
even if they're all 40-year-old, right? So I think having a better sense of all of the needs at all of the schools at one time makes a lot more sense. Whether we can fix any of it or a part of it, at least we'll know if we're going to be in a situation where in 5 years the lifespan of something will not be viable, then we have a couple years to figure out what we're going to do if we don't have the money to fix that plumbing, electrical issue, whatever it is. I'd rather have, I hate to spend our money here knowing that we don't have a future bond out available to fund large projects, but I'd actually rather know what the large projects are going to be so we can make better decisions about what schools are higher priority than others. I mean, the work we've done so far has been largely based upon when buildings were built and work that we've done when we've paid people to go out and look at, facilities, but we haven't, like Alex said, opened up walls unless we have had to, district-wide to look at that. So I think it's money worth spending, even though it's going to be uncomfortable, knowing that we're going to get answers that we don't have. We're going to get problems that we don't have answers to because we're not going to have the funding. But that's how you're going to develop the plan to do the next work.
Well, but in order to, if we're going to develop a plan to do the next set of work, it requires basically redoing the facilities master plan, right, to come up with something that is downsized and makes sense. I don't know if we're proposing today to go off and do that. What I thought we were discussing, and Alex, maybe help me understand, is where do you want to end up with this work? What's the goal of doing this work now?
The goal of doing this work is to do a deeper dive on the structural integrity of our buildings, seismic, emergency, the site utilities. That's why I propose potentially an RFQ rather than an RFP to hire a company that can come in and do that work, not knowing exactly what that scope would be. So I think the conversation about scope can happen at a future meeting. What we need to do is get a reputable, qualified company to come in here and tell us what the status is of many of our facilities and whether they're going to have to come offline if they're not upgraded or repaired, and similar to our site utilities.
I'm okay with going for an RFQ because we can talk about that scope conversation.
Right.
And I think, I'm not familiar enough to say what has been done.
I didn't think we were agendizing anything other than just to give staff direction that they can proceed on this, right?
So if I'm hearing what I'm hearing is Dr. Butler is on the right track for our April meeting to bring back an RFQ to be flown to get some quality experts in here to do the work to give us the information we need, so we know the lifespan of our facilities and our utilities.
That seems very reasonable. Megan, did you want to say anything or no? No? Okay, so is that enough direction, Dr. Butler? Okay. All right.
Okay, and speaking of the emotional safety, this goes along the lines of our student mental health initiatives, and we've done quite a bit regarding the student mental health of our students. So I'm not going to go into, you're welcome to read the report and look at our accomplishments. I'm just going to, for the sake of brevity, go through the recommendations moving forward. It's to establish social emotional education as a graduation requirement at the high school level through the sophomore seminar series, and this was presented to the board last meeting, and that is in the works. To consider the semester end before winter break at the high school level, so kids can get a break and not be pressured to study for finals over winter vacation. To reduce the amount of homework, particularly at the secondary level, and ensure the efficacy of homework which is assigned. We have an April 15th board study session. We're really excited about that. It's going to be a little bit different format. We're going to have a panel format where we're going to have teachers and counselors, and we're going to talk about homework, and we're going to talk about APs. So those are the two kind of subjects. And so that'll come up, and it's the amount, and it's also the efficacy or the quality of the homework. I'm advocating that our students are allowed to take home their tests and review them as a learning experience. And there's a great research article out of Stanford, Challenge Success, that is in the report as well, that I encourage you to read, supporting the fact that kids get a better understanding of what they need to improve on and what they need to learn if they can take their tests home and go through it and go over it either with their parents or with somebody that is good in that subject area. So that's my recommendation. That is happening quite a bit in our schools, but it is also, there's many cases where our kids aren't able to take their tests home at all. And so that can be a detriment to the kids trying to learn. And also to continue to study the cause of sleep deprivation. At the last meeting, the data suggested 88% of our high school kids were identified as sleep deprived. And so we think there are many causes. We need to continue to study this and determine ways our school district, what can we do to help with that? We can't do everything to solve the issue, clearly, but I believe there are some things we can do to help support that. So these are the social emotional recommendations.
So, Dr. Turner, I'm very excited to see these, the homework and the tests, and especially sleep deprivation. And for lack of a better term, I'm happy to see that we are implementing passive measures as well as the active measures that we're taking at our schools. Right? These are things that don't require a student to do one more thing to seek help. These are things that will help them without them having to do anything different. And I think it's important that we are tackling it both ways. We're giving them an opportunity to reach out at school, but we're also taking some of the pressure off of them that will, passively improve their emotional well-being. So thank you for presenting these.
I think I brought this up one time, but it'd have to be looked at potentially like semester ending for the middle school. I know the middle school is on a trimester system. Potentially looking at a quarter or semester system, could that also be something to look into so then they could potentially end the semester at winter break as well?
So through the report card review process at the elementary level, one of the conversations that's come up at the elementary level from the teachers that were in the room was looking at whether or not we wanted to look at a quarter system or a semester system consistently from elementary, which would then impact middle and then high school as well. Currently, we would be working with our Teachers Association related to that if we were to make a shift. Anecdotally, some teachers have shared at the elementary level that they would be interested in exploring that idea. But again, I know that one of the conversations has been high school, so we're going to work through that process and then we can review that.
No, I mean, I think it's good. I do think on the homework, to me, the key is make the last part, ensuring the efficacy piece, and that we differentiate. And then likewise on the test taking home, I do think, I think that we need that discussion as well, because it's clear that that's not happening, and I'm not sure I fully understand why, but that's something that would benefit our students, that they were able to review their work so that they could learn what they need to get better at next time.
I don't have much to say. I've been a big fan of number 2 and number 4. They're not numbered, but I'm numbering them for you for a long time, and I'm excited for those discussions to go forward.
Good. Keep going.
So looking at proficiency for grade level proficiency in ELA and math, at the secondary level, particularly at middle school right now, we're studying a tutorial period. We've seen different models of how that works in other middle schools, potentially even a 7-period day at the intermediate school, which would allow our students to take a foreign language and an elective rather than having to choose between foreign language or an elective. Also would give us the ability to eliminate 0 periods. So that's something we're also interested in studying. Intervention periods, particularly during the school day, is the goal. We've done more of it this year, but we don't have a systemic intervention during the school day secondary program yet. And many districts also do at-risk summer school programs for kids that need support. And I did not know this until recently, that we don't do that here. So that is something that for us to consider is for the district, it would be an expense for the district to pay for kids to get summer school support.
Okay, so when you found out that we don't offer at-risk summer school, did you get any sense of what that would, how we would can create that so we could find money in the budget to provide that?
Yeah, so we could do elementary, middle, and high school. So the cost would be depending on how in depth we go. Typically, the way it works is teachers identify kids for the program. They send a notice to the parents saying your child is invited to a summer school program for support in math or English, typically. And it's usually 3 weeks or 6 weeks. Usually you don't have a problem getting the teachers to want to, work in the summer. And it could be, it's a very doable program if we want to invest in it. So there's a lot of models that are already out there that we could easily use.
Right. So what I'm saying is, have you thought through, or are we going to for this next summer? Is this in 2 summers then, not this summer? Because we don't really have the funding for this summer. So
yes, that's correct.
Okay.
We're not ready for it for this summer,
Okay.
but it is something that we should consider, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
If I remember right, us older parents, I believe that this was offered way back in the day, at least at the elementary level, way back a long time ago. It was a pretty small program, but from what I recall, it was effective. We just didn't have money for it as times got bad. Way back in the mid-2000s, something like that.
Okay. Well, I do appreciate that you are providing different opportunities, different ideas, different ways to solve the same problems we've been having. So I appreciate that. Rick, do you have anything?
Yeah, a couple things. One, I'm really happy to see the 7-period day at intermediate school, because I do think increasing electives and opportunities for the kids is important. On the intervention, it seems to me that we've actually, I think you've done great work in the whole system in creating opportunities for intervention. And our issue now is that we're not actually getting enough kids through intervention that need it. So we need to find a way to increase the capacity of those intervention programs, because sometimes it's only a few kids get it for 1 trimester at a middle school. It's maybe 7-period day helps with that. The other thing is that I don't see elementary on here, and so we didn't talk about this, but I'm wondering if we couldn't do, let's say, pick our 3 campuses. It's one of the advantages of having 10 campuses. We kind of have labs among the elementary schools, but pick the 3 that have the most need of improvement in our test results and decide, that we're going to have something more targeted there. Because I think that, I forget if you sent it around or somebody sent something around that shows that you really want to get kids by 6th grade up to grade level, or we're fighting from behind with all this other intervention later. So the more resources that we can put into getting kids at that 6th grade, in elementary, the better off we'll be for the long term. So.
Okay. Megan? Anything?
I'm just happy again to see the tutorial period and intervention being looked at. So thank you.
Okay. Matt, thank you.
Just going to echo Rick's enthusiasm for a 7-period day, not only for the opportunity for language and elective, but also it gives us a little more flexibility in class sizes, right, in our master schedule. So I'm happy to see that we might be it's addressing many things at the same time.
Yeah, and it gets rid of the 0 period, which is a good thing for middle school
sleep,
children.
yep.
Yeah, very good. Okay, Dr. Chernus?
So all students have the opportunity for high quality academic instruction. So our recommendations along this line is in a lot of ways represents a lot of the work we're doing currently to review the standards and curriculum alignment with the goal of ultimately developing our own common assessments, looking at data to drive the decisions we're making in the classroom, training our teachers on effective instructional models, studying the current honors and AP system for their effectiveness, which we'll be able to do at the April 15th study session. And then I spoke a lot at the State of the District about the value of communication skills. And we need to look at ways to further develop public speaking and communication and get that into the curriculum. In San Marino, the speech and debate teacher at San Marino High School is a full-time teacher that has 5 classes that are packed. And it's because he's a great teacher. But what we saw is a lot of these kids are getting into great schools, not just because they have the grades and the test scores, but the public speaking piece is a unique complement in many cases to a kid that is even a math and science kid. The MITs, the Caltechs love those kind of kids that are the math, science, STEM kids that are also champion debaters. So it's a unique skill set, whatever we can do to try to get speaking, communication, and those skills translate to all classes. So that's something I'm really interested in exploring. Elementary foreign language, so we have a committee, we're studying it right now. We do see the value of it. Currently it's being successfully offered at Silver Spur through an enrichment model, and so we're looking to expand the enrichment model next year until such a time that we either have the resources or a system that can work during the school day. Evaluate the effectiveness of our current mathematics curriculum. And so there is a dip in our math scores as kids get older. And so particularly middle school compared to elementary, and we're better in lower elementary than upper elementary. So we really need to identify what's going on with our kids. Are we effectively teaching them what they need to know? Is our curriculum the right curriculum, or do we need to change or supplement that curriculum at the elementary level? So I think we need a lot of work. I know the district, I'm learning about the history of math here, and there's quite a bit of it. And I know we changed, and I know we have a different math curriculum now, but that doesn't mean we just need to say everything's great because we already changed and we're not going to look at it again. We need to look at it. We have an issue in math, and we need to look at all factors, including the curriculum, moving forward. So that's something that I think is a priority. And we need to continue to prioritize updating curriculum, teaching materials, and again, aligned to state standards and College Board requirements, and that's really for all subjects.
Okay. Does anyone have anything they want to add on this recommendation page? Rick?
All good things. I do think that there's one other thing culturally that I'd like to see us emphasize in the district, which kind of learned from Ira, actually, right before you, which was trying to have the departments and grade levels hold themselves accountable for raising the quality and making sure that everybody in their department, is providing the same kind of high-level instruction experience to our kids, because we really have, great teachers in the district, and if they're setting the bar, I think that we'll be able to effectively get that done throughout the district.
And actually, and adding to that, I was hoping that we would, as we look at curriculum, we look at changes, we look at our needs to look at open source curriculum. Is that is that the right terminology, open source? I feel like that's not the right word.
In April, I'm going to a district down in San Diego to go explore what they're doing.
Okay. I mean, it can be obviously good for all subject areas, but I think when you have some specific needs, you want to do something hybrid, I think it would be good for us and be great for our teachers to be able to learn different skills to do more curriculum development that's very specific to what our needs are. So I know that's not free, but it is probably less costly than traditional publishers are. So thank you. Anything over there? Matt or Megan?
When we're talking about prioritizing updating curriculum and teaching materials, I mean, as we know, there's a lot of things that touch, math especially, and, the current curriculum, a lot of parents have a very difficult time helping their student with homework because they don't understand, now it's, as if I'm getting it right, it's, a spiral approach versus a more linear approach to math, and there's new terms and new ways that it's being presented that parents aren't able to help. So I would love to see a parental education component. What are, this is the lesson. This is lesson 5.1. What is the goal of lesson 5 that our parents could look at and go, okay, now I see what you mean by kick the ball. Because I think if we get parents more involved in homework, it's better in many levels. But it's, as a parent, and you're busy, and you're looking, you're like, I don't know what kickball is. Why didn't your teacher teach you this? Tell her tomorrow you don't know, right? As opposed to, what she meant was, do this. And that's a simple, easy answer. But if, as parents, we don't know, our students are, trying to learn with one hand tied behind their back.
I mean, Lindsay, Dr. Gotanda, just so you know, when we first adopted the math curriculum in elementary, Point Vicente had a lot of parent education nights to teach the parents about the math, and I think that was very successful. Maybe other elementaries did it also, but I know Point Vicente was very strong in that. So I don't see every single thing that every principal sends out, although I do feel like I see a lot of it. But I don't know how much we're doing that anymore. So maybe we need to resurrect, those parent meetings at the beginning of the year where we're teaching our parents to understand what the math is about.
And I've also been looking for some parent resources. So there is a parent handout that can go with every chapter. So I just actually got that, and I haven't showed it to Dr. Chernus yet, but I will show it to him next week. We've just been dealing with a lot of other things. And then also I've found some videos that really are intended for the teacher, but the parents could watch them to understand kind of what the teaching looks like for that chapter.
And that would be great. Give the parent a chance. Give the parent a chance, mm-hmm. Right? I got hooked on phonics. I was the first one to get hooked on phonics in my family, right? And my parents were like, "What? Not sight words?" So yeah.
But yeah, back we had everyday math. There was a parent letter of every chapter that you're supposed to have read, so you knew how to help your child. And so I don't know if our current math book doesn't have that, but certainly, we need to do something.
They do. I think we just have not utilized them as consistently as we could.
And I think when you send something home, you might actually get it read. And when you say to a parent on an email, oh, by the way, go online, find this thing, and go click on this link, people are going to be less likely to do that. You really are more likely to read stuff that you find in your kid's backpack. So it's just true, Okay. Dr. Chernus, are we moving on to the next one?
So with respect to where we are with ed technology, computer science, and STEM, again, you don't see all the accomplishments, which are many and detailed in my report. But as far as future recommendations, one is to look at embedding computer science, recognizing it's a language and embedding it K-12. And so what you see in most districts that aren't doing much with it is you'll have one-offs, like an hour of code or just a snapshot of computer science. An hour of code is when everybody's doing coding for an hour on one day in 1 year. But what we're seeing is our kids are they're very good and they learn quickly, and the programs like Scratch are incredible. And so we really need to work on having a more comprehensive K-12 computer science program, so our kids, especially with the fact that we have these now elementary STEM labs at all of our elementary schools. Developing a learning management system, so you may hear the term LMS, so that's a learning management system. An example of that is like Blackboard, which a lot of the universities use. So to have a platform where you could do online learning, online instruction, video conferencing, and then you can do grading, grades, homework, all email communication through one system like Blackboard. So that's something that would be great, especially in times like now when we're trying to figure out how do we go online with where if we had a system, an LMS, it would be much easier. And then expanding our outdoor ed program, and we're doing quite a bit of that at our middle school, and we're trying to expand that as well.
I mean, we obviously need the learning management system. Getting everybody on one platform and agreeing to use one would be helpful for our kids. But in this kind of a situation where we have potentially schools being impacted by illness, that would really be helpful. So we're glad we're considering that, even though we already had this on our list. Does anybody have anything else they want to?
Very excited with the computer science as a language. You know, kids, forces them to think logically and sequentially, and also it provides instant feedback and success. You know, you run the program, hey, it worked, good job, congratulations, right? So it is, it's very exciting to see this up here and seriously considered as a language. Blackboard is a terrific platform. Very, very thrilled using that. So again, I like it.
Two quick things. Yeah, this all looks great, especially the learning management system, and like Suzanne said, getting everyone on the same page. I know that we're looking at that too with the Technology Advisory Committee. Expanding the outdoor education program for middle school. Love that. That's great. And then, again, since this topic is focused on STEM, and the M stands for math, and part of math is financial literacy. And again, I'm just going to throw that out there as something that I think is really important for our students to be able to get that education when they leave high school, so at least they are somewhat knowledgeable in budgeting, investing, debt, all of those good things. We can't rely on parents for that. So again, I know that hopefully that's agendized, but just throwing that in since it's part of the math in this topic. So yeah.
Okay, the next section is being at the forefront of innovation. And so to continue to support and enhance our community partnerships we have, to continue the design and development of the Marine Science Center. And so I think we're targeting April to have our architects come and share the plans that we have for the Marine Science Center in Malga Cove. And then continue the idea of some sort of district enrichment academy to serve our kids who are GATE kids, advanced level students. And we have so many community resources, so many amazing people in the community that can help teach our kids and enrich our kids to continue to consider this as some sort of idea moving forward.
Does anybody have anything they want to mention on this one?
Rick, go ahead.
So I just had, I think it's on our future agenda topics list here that we also take advantage of community expertise in the substitute teaching population so that we can get those people who actually are advanced in those subjects as substitute teachers.
And then, as I'm sure Dr. Ernst is aware, but for the community, GATE and advanced level are separate, right? You can be a GATE student and not performing to the same level. GATE students have IEPs. They are special education as well. And I think that they are underserved in our district currently. And so having a program now that addresses that issue is very important to their well-being as well.
Linda, do you have anything on this?
Is this the last slide, or is there one more?
One more. We're on the
Okay,
home
all right.
stretch.
No, it's fine. I had a general comment, so I just wanted to hear the last slide first.
Oh, okay. Good. I mean, our well, our community partnerships and our community support in general are critical to all of our projects, honestly. So there's a lot we could say about all these things, but clearly very important.
And just one other thing too, noticing the private-public partnerships, I know just throwing in nonprofits too, wherever, I think that would be good to reach out to them if needed in some way, or whatever the topic may be for that academy, would be good just to look at them too.
Okay, so we have two more slides. One is on the goal of having our teachers be the best trained and supported workforce in California. And so we'll be working through bargaining on trying to strengthen the teacher evaluation tool, the peer assistance review process, and then consider development of systems to incentivize teachers who perform above and beyond expectations, and better systems, whether it's PAR or others, to help teachers who are not performing to expectations, to continue to train and support principals as the instructional leaders at the site. So we did some training earlier this year on the difference between managers of a school versus leaders, and so we want them to be instructional leaders and not just manage the day-to-day operations of their school site. And also ways to train and incentivize our classified support staff as well.
Okay, Matt, do you have anything on this?
Absolutely. We want the best trained and supported workforce in the state. And I think it also needs to start earlier during initial probation periods, where we want to have the best teachers moving forward into a permanent position and being granted tenure. It shouldn't be, well, they're good enough. It should be, we can't live without them, right? It should be, these teachers need to really excel as in their probation 1 and 2, because we're going to basically give them a career for life. We want to make sure that only the best teachers are really coming into our district. There's that wonderful book, and they talk about, Finland's success and why Finland is so successful in their education program, despite having shorter hours, less homework, and everything. It's because the teachers are well trained, like we're trying to get our teachers to be, but even those who aren't here yet, let's get them up to that next level and make sure that we are really concentrating on getting the best teachers into our district.
Yeah, it all looks great. The thing that I'm focused most on are the third and fourth bullet. I think those are the most interesting. So helping teachers who perform below expectations. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're coaching and helping as much as possible. So that's always important. And then the third bullet point, considering systems that could incentivize teachers who perform really well. I think that will be interesting to look at. So, yep.
Okay. Anything?
I'd like to echo Megan there. We have great teachers in the room today, right now, and so actually, it's probably half the audience is almost teachers here, and it's the dedicated teachers in the district who perform above and beyond that we ought to find a way to reward and incentivize. On the second to last bullet, penultimate bullet, on the chief instructional leader, I do think that that's important, but I also think it's important because of how we've designed the teams at the sites, at the secondary sites, that we also provide that instructional leadership training to the APs at the secondary sites, because in many cases they're really providing that overall leadership.
Mm-hmm. Linda, do you have anything on this?
No, I'm just curious to see I think I understand what 2 and 4 look like, but I don't understand really what 3 would look like. Or the point, I guess, is that we don't know what it would look like.
Right.
Okay.
We don't know, and we don't have a lot of dollars to do professional development, right? And professional development is one of those topics that kinds of comes and goes with budgets. I've seen districts that are near us who are cutting professional development literally immediately when the budget, gets tough. So I hope we can kind of stay the course, and we have done a lot more in professional development the last few years, and I think it's paid off in a lot of ways. I do think that, it never ends, right? The technology that our teachers are required to use every single day actually doesn't stop changing. So even if you know your subject matter and you're great at it, learning how to do all of the pieces that are required now just to operate in the world we live in doesn't change. And people don't learn that on their own for the most part. So that we need to be cognizant of that. And then the part about the supporting principals as the chief instructional leader, I think since my time in the district, that's really a cultural shift. And I'm glad we're there, and I'm glad we're pushing that, because that's where we should be, and that's not where we were in the past in many schools. So that is a good thing. And again, all our principals and associate principals and all those who want to become principals, need to be part of that. I know we've done a lot of work in HR with, providing our staff with opportunities to reach and get to the next level. And that's work that we really do on top of all the other work. And I want you to know at least we appreciate that and we see that happening, because we do all this really with very little extra resources. And it'd be very easy to say you don't have the money and to not do it. And that would be the wrong message. So I do want to say that we appreciate that.
Okay, last but not least, how do we, as a school community, define success? And so everybody wants to be the best. We want to be number one. Well, what measures are we going to use? How are we going to define that? Well, there's some that are quantitative and some that are qualitative. Some quantitative measures is specific to how we spend our resources. And so developing a balanced budget is important, and we're not there. And it's a goal of ours. And so that's something that is definitely a recommendation, and I'm sure Dr. Butler would agree that that would be a good thing for us to achieve as a district. And I know our Budget Advisory Committee has also opined on that, as our board has. So in addition to that, we've talked about establishing a minimum reserve level. I understand the BAC is continuing that conversation around potentially a range. Looking at how much we spend per site, per pupil per site, and also looking at the fact that in absence of a facility bond measure, we need to start putting money away to repair emergency repair. So this would be a new suggestion moving forward as we get to adopted budget, is to develop and allocate funding towards an emergency repair fund. Looking at enrollment, right-sizing the district based on enrollment trends, which I've mentioned before. I've discussed district-wide common assessments. Many districts have these. With that, we can rely less on state assessments and more on our own. And we are beginning that process already with our teachers. Looking at statewide standardized tests, nationwide standardized tests, APs, SATs, ACTs, and so on and so forth. And then that qualitative bit, the surveys, the Healthy Kids surveys, the parent surveys, to measure how we're doing as a school district, student mental health, measure all those more qualitative but very important areas. And that concludes my report.
Okay. Linda, I'll go that way this time.
I just, my only comment is this, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but so you can't develop a balanced budget and do all of these great things. So there's going to be a time where we might have to prioritize some of these, and we might do a lot of work, especially at cabinet level, to study something that we can't afford to do. So I don't want us to do too many things, but there's nothing, everything is fantastic. So I wanted to have a lot of these things, and some are things that I brought up, or we've all brought up over time. I'm just concerned about how we certainly can't get there in a year with doing all these things and balancing a budget. It's just not possible, not now. And so I'm curious, Dr. Chernus, maybe if just, I don't want to put you on the spot right now, but just kind of think about like if there were one or two, curriculum things that you really feel most passionate about. Is it elementary foreign language? Is it outdoor science? Is it computer science K through 12? Like kind of, because we might come to a point where we're going to have to look into things and sort of decide we just can't afford to do this, but we can actually afford to do that, or we can get a grant for this part, or we can figure out a way to do this, at least at these schools, or something like that.
Yeah, well,
because money-wise, I just don't see, I don't see a solution for all these things.
I think that a lot of these things mentioned here don't cost anything that we could do or that we are doing. Studying curriculum, improving, developing common assessments, moving the semester, looking at being more effective homework, or letting the kids take the tests home. So there is a lot in here, I think, that are recommendations that are just good for kids, that are good for our district, that won't cost anything. The other part is you're absolutely right. We can't afford to do everything. But I also think that we're spending money on some things that maybe we don't need to spend money on, that we could redistribute, I think.
We like to get that list of things you think we don't need to be spending money on. Looking forward to that one. Rick?
I think it's another great report. I liked your report last year, and I like that a lot of it is what you identified last year, but also there are new initiatives in here to move us forward, and I think it's great. So if we can get all this done, I think we'll be even better off than we are now.
Can I ask, actually I'll go last. So Megan?
Just thank you for everything that you have done so far, and looking at everything that you have put together. It all makes sense. And, it's nice to see too on this document kind of what we're doing and what we're continuing to do in the recommendations. I do agree with Linda. How are we going to prioritize things? And a lot of the things that you said, like you stated, don't require funds. So how can we try to balance those things and prioritize will be important. Yeah.
So by developing district-wide common assessments, is that where we're talking about priority standards? I just want to make sure we're speaking the same. The assessment is assessing the standards, but we are working, and that's still about a year out, 15, 16
Yeah, so we're in it right now. So do you want to speak to where we are?
Sure. So all of our elementary schools have come through with our instructional coach to actually really look at what they're teaching, what they plan on teaching, looking at the blueprint of the test. What are we actually testing our kids on? And is there alignment? And then going back and aligning our curriculum. So I think for a lot of teachers, there has been a lot of really good conversations and a lot of good takeaways so that they're able to do that with the idea that sites are going to be working on their ins and outs. So what do we want kids to come in with at each grade level, and what do we want them to leave with at the end of the grade level? And then what we'll do is we'll start working on those by grade level district-wide. So we're about a year away, but we are working with all of these schools.
Terrific. That's exciting. When our kids leave fifth grade, go into our middle school teachers should expect all of our students to have, a common basis.
Well, and I think that's one of the things is the vertical articulation within a school. So let's just say K through 5. It hasn't been something that we've talked about, as much as we could have. And so it's something that we're starting to really talk about. And then even between levels, between 5th and 6th, and then we can start moving between 8 and 9, or even like algebra to geometry. So I think this is an opportunity for us to really refine that. And Educational Services is working through that process. So.
Perfect. Thank you. Dr. Turns, thank you for your report. I appreciate the forward-looking, and these are reasonable. Linda's right. We can't afford to do all of it, but there's nothing up there that was just like, oh my God, that's so far-fetched, right? These are all things that are, if not this year, in the short term, attainable. And so, thank you for your presentation.
And I do think, like at the elementary level, we will have teachers say, keep adding things. We need less things, more time, right? But I do think that in some cases, when you add foreign language or you add computer science instruction, that does help kids learn a different way. So you might get more, reading and math instruction improvement because kids are actually learning different skills and there's carryover. And what we really want is our kids to want to come to school. And I think both of those subjects reach some children that really want to be there for those subjects. So I think it's good. I think it's hard to think you're going to do more, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that's our job, is to keep kind of pushing the envelope. I wanted to ask the comment, analyze per pupil expenditures per school site. So what is the purpose of that?
To look at how we're allocating resources. So we may have some schools with very few students and many teachers. We have, like Rancho Del Mar, for example. How are we allocating resources to all of our schools? Because if we really need to take a hard look at how to maximize our resources, we need to see where we're spending our resources.
Okay.
And so that's to look more of a micro level at the amount of money we're allocating to every site.
And are we going to be looking at that, including what the schools get for Booster Club and PTA dollars also?
Yes.
That really changes the situation at many schools based upon how much dollars those groups are bringing in. And it honestly changes the educational experience.
Yeah, we'll take that into consideration.
Good. I think we should. So the fund, there's a couple things on the budget, but I'm going to wait because we're going to do a budget conversation, so we can discuss that then. So, but that was a lot of work. I appreciate that. Anybody who wants to kind of know where we're going can look at that report and get kind of a sense of where we started in September and kind of where we are today. So thank you very much. Okay, so that, okay, so one thing we did not include is a BAC report, and I guess we can't do that now because we didn't agendize that, but you guys had a meeting, right?
We do.
You do?
It's O, but we have SCROC first.
Oh, I didn't see it on there. Okay, you're right. I have this weird one. Okay, so yes, I know we have SCROC, so that's N. How come I didn't see that? Okay.
SCROC, we had our meeting last week, and School Services of California came in and provided a report basically outlining, it was required by the state that they do this report. And unfortunately, the report was full of errors, was not complete, and it was very disappointing, this report. Their final model, which was a potential recommendation on how to fund SCROC, was completely wrong. It was a spreadsheet error. I don't know how it made it through their quality control, but I was very disappointed in School Services of California. So unfortunately, I don't have, because one of the things that we had asked for was a cost per student per class, right? So that we could base, right now, currently we're paying $1,234 per student per class. The rough average cost, if you were just to simply take the cost of operating divided by the enrollment, is about $3,306 per student. And so we were trying to find out which classes were, the most expensive, and do a cost-benefit analysis, not just to say we're going to cancel the most expensive classes, but to look and see which ones are really moving students in the direction of the 21st century. But unfortunately, that information was not available in the report, and we had I think Mike Bell was his name, from the state of California, and he came down and he said, "That's your job to know, SCROC, you need to know that." And I agreed that we should know it, but we didn't, and that's why we asked for this report to be done. So we are now looking at forming subcommittees that will look at curriculum, we'll look at funding, we'll look at budget, trying to see, because right now we are not in a sustainable model. We are, Mr. Bell came in and he said there is no more deal. We had the $10 million deal. He said that's not coming again. He said, you guys are the gold standard of, regional occupational centers, but you're on your own. And right now we are trying to work through it. The SCROC board, they're committed to the success of this. And all of us are aware of the difficulties we are facing. I want to thank Dr. Chernis for providing his comments on the SSC report. It was so useful to go in there and have all these facts literally at my fingertips. when something came up. So I really appreciate the time and effort that you put into that. It was great to say, we're down 50% enrollment. Why are we only down 9% in cost, in what we're paying in our salaries? So that is the state of SCROC. I wish I had more good news to share with you. We did have one of our students from Peninsula come, and he spoke, and he's done this terrific program with medical throughout. And he was a very well-spoken young man. I'm very proud to see him there. His name was Michael, I believe.
Oh, yeah, I saw that picture. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so great guy. I think we need as a district, all the districts on that committee are very close to deficit spending, and they're all struggling the same way to come up with money. Manhattan Beach, as everybody's aware, is laying off. Last I heard from was 39 and a half full-time employees. So the question is, when we can't afford to pay our teachers, how are we able to do these programs at the same time? And but there's a lot of soul searching that's going to need to go on within SCROC. For example, they had offered a photography course this last semester, but every one of the JPA districts offers their own in-house photography class. So the question is, why would you offer something that every district is offering? So it is a model that, very similar to our own district, is going to have to make some tough choices and really do some deep dives into where we expect this education to take our children, our students.
One comment I would have to say, in the photography class, so it used to be, and I don't know if it's still the case, right? But in many cases, our students went to SCROC, and it wasn't a class that they took there in lieu of a class here. They were taking a full schedule here and then going to SCROC, right? So you were taking your full complement and then couldn't fit photography in, so you took it at SCROC. So it served different purposes for different districts. And maybe the time has come where you say, kids can't take whatever they want, however they want. They can't have 9 classes. They can't have 10 classes. We're not there, but SCROC needs to be there because they need to understand that we need to help make sure our kids are in classes that make sense to be here and not taking a class there instead when you have a limitation.
We cannot subsidize just electives for fun when our own students are missing out. So I completely agree. One other thing I did want to bring up, I almost forgot, was adult education. One of the big concerns was always that we're supplementing adult education. It turns out that adult education is actually supplementing our high school students. We actually make more money from our adults than it costs us. So that was an interesting reversal of fact.
I saw the picture of Anna Levin. So Anna Levin was also, she's a medical assisting teacher. Amazing. I saw in that same. So she is a PVP, long-term PVPUSD parent, and was a council president and a PTA president for many years. And then when she left us, she went to go work there. So I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I was very impressed by her.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And then we did not leave the BAC off the agenda. I just thought we did. So that is our next item, O, and who is speaking to that?
Yes, I am. So if you remember last time, there was some question about whether the last BAC vote was valid because of a number of abstentions. So the BAC said that was one of their items, and they decided that they would go with the rule that an abstention was neither a vote yes or no. It was just a vote for quorum purposes and wouldn't count towards majority. So by the rules, that would have stood, but at the same time, since we hadn't had the discussion prior to the vote, it kind of reopened the discussion around what reserve level. So in that vote had been at 16.5%. There was some discussion which the BAC may be converging towards, of instead of just having a level of a maximum aspiration level, of actually coming to some kind of range where you'd have kind of an aspirational level where you're trying to get, but then also kind of a floor that for the board to invade that, there would have to be some kind of different board vote to make it clear that there was a real dire circumstance that required going before the floor level, below the floor level of reserves. And so that's kind of where it got left off. And then, a big piece of this in terms of what does that aspirational level really mean, and what does that floor level really mean, gets down to what kind of the wording of a proposed BP would be to us, board policy would be to us around fiscal responsibility. So the two co-chair people, Bruce and Teresa, agreed to form a working group, 9-person or 18-person committee, so 9 people is the brown limit. There's only 2 of them that would be doing that, and they're going to come back to the BAC next time with, I think, some preliminary language. There was also a lot of work that Bruce had done in terms of helping illustrate where all the reserves money were and how they were characterized. So in terms of creating a matrix around fund numbers, i.e. Fund 1 being the general fund, Fund 17 basically being the general fund but being segregated, Fund 63 having been our, our other enterprise fund now collapsed into Fund 1, Fund 40 I think is capital, but we have a plethora of reserve funds. And then I think it's by the CASBO manual, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but the California Schools Manual, accounting manual. CSAM, all right, CSAM, that they specify, that the reserves are either non-spendable, reserved, committed, which we don't tend to use in the district, assigned or unassigned. And so Bruce has spent some time on terms of putting that matrix together in the hopes of better communicating where all the dollars were and how they were characterized to both the committee and to the community so that everybody could understand that. And so commend him for making that effort. Wow. But it's still confusing. I mean, I don't think any way I think partly because of that CSAM and just the complexities of school accounting, it's not simple. Right. And so it is complex, and it's taken us 2 years now with the BAC to get the BAC members to this level. And the BAC did not discuss any potential changes to the budget, and that's something that, the BAC was focusing on the reserve policy, partially because of if a bond passed and we had a policy around that could provide credit rating enhancements that would have lowered our borrowing costs. So that's not as pressing a need, but the BAC is kind of behind the curve in terms of providing input on the budget for next year because it hasn't spent any of its working time on that to this point. Okay.
It's a lot of work. I appreciate that, the BAC and what they have agreed to take on. I do think that the reserve range is a really good thing to work toward still as times get tougher, not easier. It's better to have, something that we can all look to. And I hope that they, keep going. And honestly, that meeting and that series of meetings that we've done for a couple of years, and then honestly the SCROC meeting, I mean, these are difficult assignments. They're time consuming. They're extra work for everybody. You have a lot more reading and understanding to do. I appreciate it. I'm sure everyone does not appreciate how much work that is. I know it's a lot of work because every organization is similar to ours, and they're really struggling with how to figure out how to spend our dollars in the most effective way. And so I thank you. I hope that we feel like that time is well spent.
And the committee members. I mean, they're
They are all the committee members. No, I don't mean just you. I mean all the people on those committees. Really, it's a lot of work. And when I was going to both of those different groups last year, I mean, people come, they have their stuff ready, they know what they're talking about, they contribute. It is just a lot of time and energy that's put into that. I know most people don't appreciate that or don't have any sense of that, but it's we all thank everybody who does that work. I mean, Bruce Colon has had to spend a bazillion hours on this. So, and he's a retired teacher. I think he brings a lot of credibility when he's there, and he's a finance guy too. So thank you very much. And
so building on that comment though, and some of also with the FAC meeting and this, these are all Brown Act meetings. They're open to the public. Right. Agendas are published in advance. We have a page on our website under the Board of Education that just says, or under our district that says committees. has the list of committees, it has the meeting dates, and the public is welcome to attend and, provide comments just like they do here at the board meeting at either that public comment period if it's not agendized or on any of the topics that are agendized during the meeting.
Right.
And as everybody's mentioned, they're volunteers, and they don't speak on behalf of the district, even though they provide a lot of input to the district.
Right. Okay, so thank you very much. Now, we are moving on to the discussion action part of our meeting. P1, second interim report, something we all look forward to. Kathy?
Well, I think we love it.
We do. I actually do like it. I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's in the weeds. It's good.
Well, Kathy Uenton obviously does an exceptional job putting all this together, as you've seen time and time again. So I will let her take it away with the presentation when it gets up and running, unless you want me to stall. We good?
I should bring you a chocolate candy bar from having to sit through all the audits for 2 hours at 3 to 5. And now this is a double bonus great day.
My job. Okay, let's see. All right, here we go. So, members of the board, Dr. Chernus, Executive Cabinet, thank you for the opportunity to present to you the district's 2019-20 second interim report. And I know everyone already knows, but second interim is one of our 4 budget reporting periods we have each year, and it contains financial data as of January 31st. So here we're showing basically how the 1920 budget has evolved since its adoption last June. I do have some additional details on the next couple of slides, but if we just look at the first couple columns just briefly, the way the adopted budget has changed to form the operating budget, which is basically first interim. The most significant change between those 2 columns is the addition of the revenues and expenditures from the district's enterprise programs, and I'm sure you remember that from first interim, so that's the major change there. And then looking at how second interim compares to the operating budget, we have improved our bottom line somewhat. It's mainly due to a couple of one-time adjustments that I'll explain in just a bit, but we've gone from a negative 1.9 million to negative 1.3. And I do want to emphasize that 1.3 million deficit, if you will, is not a structural deficit. It is us spending prior year carryover. So, for example, we've budgeted to spend a chunk of that restricted lottery money from last year. There's also some site gifting carryover and some other restricted programs. So that really is what makes up that 1.3 million deficit that you see there. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because basically you've seen all of this at first interim, but this is the changes that we made between adopted budget and first interim. And again, the most significant difference is the transfer of the operations from the district's enterprise funds programs from Fund 63 to the general fund. And there's obviously some other changes listed there, but again, this is basically what you saw at first interim. So now what have we done at second interim? And to be honest, not a lot. We haven't had a lot of changes we need to make. The most significant difference would be the change in the special ed contribution. And that is mainly due to those one-time adjustments I just mentioned. We are getting some prior year revenue adjustments from the SELPA, but the bulk of that $800,000 change in the contribution is due to a prior year adjustment in what we owed the SELPA for excess costs. So they had given us one number at the end of last year, and now it's significantly less. So that ends up being a one-time bonus, if you will, for the general fund in the current year. And then you can see there's just a couple of other minor changes that we've made. So now for our multi-year projections, I do want to point out that we have now brought in the fund balances from the Enterprise Fund 63 into the general fund, hence the asterisk next to the beginning balance for 1920. At first interim, we had only brought in the revenues and expenditures, but we have now moved over the fund balance as well. So again, for 1920, you see that same 1.3 million that we're spending in carryover. And then for the 2021 and 21-22 years, we've made changes based on our assumptions at second interim. And so we've incorporated any changes that we know at this time. And we've also updated the COLA from the governor's January budget. So there's not really a lot of change from first interim. The deficits in the 2 years are pretty similar to what you saw at first interim. Right now, the target for cuts in 2021, if you want to reach a balanced budget, would be the $2.2 million that you see there. I do want to point out that does not incorporate any potential salary increases. And that also assumes that the May revise is just as good, if you will, as the governor's proposed budget. But we all know that the economy is somewhat in flux right now, basically because of the impact of the coronavirus. So it's very possible that May revise will not be any better than the proposed budget from January, and there's even the possibility that there could be less funding available. But as of now, we don't know, so we're going with the proposal from January. The projections for 21-22 do look better in comparison to the prior year, and that's mainly because just like at first interim, we are holding enrollment flat. So obviously, if we do continue to decline significantly, that deficit would increase. However, if we are able to make the cuts that we're targeting for 2021, that would definitely improve 21-22. Lots of twos in there. So in order to start talking about how we can tackle the deficit next year, we've come up with a few ideas. But this is by no means a definitive or comprehensive list. It's just kind of some ideas to get started. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Horvath to discuss the first couple of items on the list.
Thank you, Ms. Uenton and board members. I think the relevancy of this, obviously, is the resolution that we passed at the last board meeting to reduce the 26 temp assignments, and we've already taken that action to do so. And as of today, we have met with and individually with all of those except for one. So having some very, in-depth and conversations with those folks, but we've taken that action. So the relevancy is just that's what we've done. The other thing that we always look at, because it does not necessarily impact individuals as far as their full-time assignments, but reducing potentially 30.2 assignments. And this is really to align with enrollment. I think along with these temp assignments and 0.2s, it helps us not only address the structural deficit, but also adjust for any enrollment shifts that are possible. And this gives us a lot of flexibility to do that. The thing that's not mentioned here, and again, it's by no means something that we wouldn't think about, but it's something that will continue. And I would suggest we continue is with we operating under a hiring freeze where we're only hiring essential positions. We look at every position that is open and consider if it is essential. So things such as that are you'll see when we hire folks, it's due to IEPs, things that because of students' IEPs, then those are things that we obviously are essential. So that would be one example of that. But we continue to do that. But then the other thing that's not mentioned here is classified staff. So if we are right sizing for certificated staff, we certainly are always looking at classified staff as well. Again, the timing is different because we're at March 15th. We have different timelines for noticing classified staff. So that's why it's not mentioned here, but certainly something that we should consider.
Okay, then moving on to the third item on the list, I believe in April we are bringing a proposal to increase meal prices for food services, and we're anticipating around $200,000 that would bring in. The deferred maintenance transfer, I would expect, is off the table at this point in time because obviously the bond measure did not pass last week. And then the last item for the extracurricular and athletics budgets, that's been on previous cut lists, but nothing has ever been implemented with regards to that. So we've just put it back on here kind of as a topic of conversation to see if it's something that we would want to pursue. So now that we've finished with second interim, where are we going now? As Dr. Chernis mentioned earlier, we need to look into establishing an emergency repair fund so that we can continue to maintain and repair district facilities in absence of bond proceeds. We'll be working with sites and district office departments for their input on building the budget over the next couple of months. Obviously, we'll have May revise in mid-May sometime with hopefully better news, but who knows. And then lastly, we'll be back to the board in June with the public hearing for the 2021 budget and its subsequent adoption. So that concludes my formal presentation, and now I'd be happy to answer whatever questions you have.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, does anyone have any questions that are specific that they would like to ask?
I just want to ask about the deferred maintenance
Okay.
Item, because in the budget it was kind of showing up in a weird way, at least that I didn't understand it correctly. So what are we going to do what's the plan for that at this point?
So the transfer is what has happened every year recently is we've moved that money into the deferred maintenance category because we've been spending it.
Right.
Okay.
And
right.
so this presentation was put together and posted, it was put together before we knew the result of the bond election. So what Kathy was saying is this probably needs to stay, probably not a cut to make because we are spending that money on
We need
repairs.
deferred maintenance.
We still need it.
Fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the budget itself, we originally had 700,000 and now it says 300,000. That's not really going to end up how it is, right?
What page are you on, Linda?
I'm on page 84 of 135. I just want to make sure I'm thinking of this I'm looking at it the right way.
Well, the
So what's our
700 is
total
how
that
we-
we're,
The 700 was how we adopted the budget.
Right.
And then we've adjusted it down to 300,000
Okay.
in the current year. And as of now, we have that same 300,000 budgeted in the out years
we
as
do.
well.
So do we need more in there or I guess that was my question.
Probably a
That's why I
bigger
didn't understand it.
conversation around
Okay.
where we are with facilities, and once we get the data that we were talking about earlier in terms of structural and site utilities, I think we need a comprehensive board meeting with that kind of data about what we're setting aside for facilities in the future.
Okay, fair enough.
So the conversation we had earlier about getting the RFQ for the structural, looking at the buildings, how is that budgeted? Like, we just came up with that, so I know it's not in the current budget, but how would we pay for something like that, which is probably going to be, pretty costly?
It is not budgeted currently.
Right.
And in the budget snapshot that I provided to the board in terms of facilities information, we've got about $2.5 million sitting in facilities funding, about $1 million in specific projects that we have against that at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of room, but
Okay.
again, also we need stuff to repair things.
So that would be likely where that would come from, would be that pot of dollars.
That's the identified source at present, unless you told us you wanted to do it out of the general fund, then we would do it that way.
Okay. Okay, good, thank you. So the multi-year projection, the COLA we got from the governor's report was 2.29?
That we are referring to the deficit based on current projections. Yes.
2.29% for next year.
Oh, sorry. Yes, that's 2.29. Originally, at first interim, it was 3 was our projection at the time. So yes, it's.
But now we know it'll be 2.29. We hope that sticks.
Right.
And we know that it costs us about 4%, our costs go up about 4% a year. So we know coming out of the gate, we are going to get less, and it's not going to be enough to even do what we did this year.
That is a situation for us and for many districts, yes.
Right. Okay. Want to be sure I was reading that correctly. Linda, anything else? No. Rick, do you have anything?
Yeah. Starting, I guess, at the beginning here. Page 21. No more about numbers in the big report, but I do have a follow-up to Susanna's one. The classified salaries, I guess, are down 145 in the year end than we thought they'd be in the budget. What's the reason?
It's a combination of things. There's some changes to substitutes in there, and also since special ed staffing kind of goes up and down, and I know that a lot of times they have trouble filling vacancies. So at a certain point, we're budgeting based on how many vacant positions we have, and if they haven't been filled at a certain point, then there's room in the budget to take a few months, let's say, of salary out. So I look at who's currently in place. How soon are they going to be hiring for vacancies and make adjustments accordingly? So instead of just budgeting a full year for every vacancy, at this point, I'm really looking at how many months are we really going to be paying.
And so is that driven by the turnover we're having in is it the BIs, the behaviors, or is it?
Not really driven by just you always have some salary savings between when people leave for whatever reason and when they come back in. Kathy does this all through her calculations, which is yeoman's work. The new system will have a salary savings module piece in there that just calculates this as you have specific positions that have not been filled.
Okay. And then 28. So, on the 6,200 account, which is the buildings and improvements of buildings, so our actuals to date are 940, but the projected year end is 400K below that at 547.
That's because, again, the 940 is as of January 31st, and what we do for simplicity of making POs and payments is the PO is all charged to routine restricted maintenance, which is part of the general fund. But in February, which obviously doesn't show up here, we've transferred $450,000-$60,000 over to deferred maintenance. So the actuals to date would be less.
But we have nothing then left in deferred maintenance now?
That would spend all of deferred maintenance. So that is now spent. And that, I believe, is represented in
But so it's not in the general fund?
Correct. It's no longer in the general fund. It's a timing issue.
And then what is this payments to county offices? And you probably told me this before, but element 7142, which is...
It's not the county office anymore. It's the SELPA for excess costs for the special ed students that are being educated, I guess, in other
So is this
districts.
the one-time money that we picked up?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
exactly. So
Okay.
that difference that you see there is the adjustment from what was projected for last year and what the actual was.
So again, it's just part of the old SELPA system was it was run through county offices, not happening now, so we pay directly to the SELPA, and in this case, saved a lot of money.
Wow.
And okay, so if I it's two parts. Is ADA on page 31? It looks like we're going to be down like 170 students because P2 is 170 students lower than what we used as our funded ADA this year.
Correct.
So
Our funded
as
ADA is from last year.
Right.
Yes.
So when we go to the MyGap on page 40, and Suzanne had pointed out that we have 2.54, which isn't enough, but with COLA being 2.29 and they're only in enrollment down 170, how do we end up with 2.54 more for LCFF?
Well, I want to make sure that we're talking about the same years that we're comparing. If you compare 2021 with 21-22, I believe that ties to the 2.54% increase that you were referring to. And the reason for that increase would be we're holding enrollment flat between those 2 years. So we would have the same funded ADA.
Okay, you picked up a mistake, but on
Yeah,
my part, which
it's
is the point, it's only
0.51.
0.51% that our funding's going up.
Correct.
So it's even worse than we thought, right?
Yeah. Next year,
So we're 3.5% in the hole from the LCFF perspective versus what, the traditional, if our costs are rising at 4% roughly annually and 0.5% is all we're getting more from the state, we're 3.5%.
We're getting the 224, 229, but then declining enrollment that's built into that year. That's why.
And that ends up at just a 0.5% overall in the budget, which makes it difficult for all of us, right? Because we got to figure out how to deal with that. Okay. Scarier than I thought. All right. And then I guess that goes to the standard on page 46, which is that one of the standards we're not meeting is the percentage of our budget that is spent on salaries and benefits.
It's been basically that same not met for some time, usually in the out years, because based on step and column and then really the STRS and PERS increases, it means that our percentage of salaries and benefits is just larger and larger compared to the entire budget.
And so that's one of the things that we had talked about having the BAC do was look at how much of our budget we put into each of the various categories, and that we haven't really tasked them to do this year because they were focused on this reserve policy. But
Right, they did that the previous iteration, but not so far this year.
Well, they focused on the cuts. They never really have focused on the, hey, should we spend on 85% on salary, or should we be spending 90% or 80%, right? And we've kind of given them some comps from other districts, but we've never really had that discussion. And if we're really, I think that's kind of where we need to go to really figure out the overall budget system in terms of how we get to that balanced budget is where should we be deploying resources.
Well, if you have a framework, then it's easier to budget to that and then say, and if you include facilities needs, right, then you say, this is what it's going to be unless we make a specific effort to change it if we have a spending framework.
Right. So I think we need to get the BAC helping us some more, not just with the reserve policy, but with where we should be spending it and on the unfortunately, the trim list for next year, and figure out how to do that in the next, 3 months we have until we adopt the...
Well, no, we need the bulk of your input for the budget. We've talked about this every year up here. We need the bulk of your
I know,
input
it
in
seems
March.
passed already, right? So.
Well, we give you March, no problem. So you've got another meeting. If there are a few adjustments in April, that's fine. I'm speaking for you, but I think we can work that in. But really, we need the bulk of your input this month.
So that gives us one meeting.
You're plus one. Got this meeting plus one more.
So I guess we need to figure out some stuff next meeting.
Right. Well, they gave us the ideas to address the structural deficit, right? And it sounded like they're reducing the temp assignments for the $2 million was already considered. That's actually in the works, right? So that's.
But we don't know
two.
exactly how that would play out because you don't know if it's possible enrollment-wise.
Right.
And you just don't know yet from the way I understand how it works. You can guess at that, but it's not an exact science, right?
But we're trying to get to the 2.2, so at least if we know and we're staffing to enrollment and we have enrollment that goes up, that's okay because,
But we need to have the discussion that Alex teed up, right? He teed up a bunch of things that we need to move forward on, reallocating resources potentially, and realistically, we need to treat our employees well, and we need to make some money for increases going into negotiations with both associations. So just getting to a balanced budget, assuming no raises, isn't realistic, right? And so we need to have a serious discussion about how to maintain a balanced budget, assuming some range of realistic outcomes of negotiation. I don't think 0% is a realistic outcome.
Kathy, typically when you're building your budget for next year, we know we'll be bringing an adopted budget to the board in June. What's the latest as far as to make adjustmts?
Really, I could make adjustments even after the public hearing, which is in early June. We typically don't do that, but I obviously could, based on when things have to be posted and the amount of time it takes to make changes. Really, if I'm ambitious, mid-May, maybe.
So I'm going to speak for Kathy on this one. And again, anything she does ripples through the budget. It's not one change that just goes there. So I would like to be firm on April 22nd would be really, give us that at the outside for anything significant. And we can work on
3 meetings?
It. Yes.
We have 2 in April.
Just one in April.
I thought we only have 1 in April.
No, we have 2 this year.
Just 1.
Yeah, spring break's the first week, so we have 2 meetings this year in April.
All right. I don't think we do, but I'll trust you.
But the
I'm looking.
So the
we do have a second one, but it's focusing on curriculum.
Yes,
it's
the
April
special
15th.
meeting. It's our special meeting on the 15th. Yeah, so we only have 1 regular meeting, the special meeting. We can add a special meeting to discuss just budgets.
We did that the prior year when we had to make,
Right.
But the other point, Kathy, I think unfortunately glossed over it, but is a valid point, which is that the state is an income tax dependent state for funding school districts and funding the general fund. Economy is very different today than it was in January when the governor submitted his budget, and that's more likely to lead to downside than upside revisions, which is the first time since I've been on the board, at least in my short tenure on the board, that's occurred. And so we need to be, ready to deal with that in the May revise. So I'm sorry, it's kind of gloomy from that standpoint. And I know the district is just immensely busy with the other events that we're planning for, but we need to figure this out as well.
And depending on how things go, we may have to, adjust once we've adopted.
There's been years it's gone down, and then there's been years we've gotten a little one-time money instead of that, so it's effectively gone down. So it's been everywhere.
I'm good on that.
Just while we're talking about this, I'm not sure where my copy is, but I think that we are going to bring up talking about the budget in general, and these are ideas. But a while back, that list from the Budget Advisory Committee that had the ideas for cuts and revenue increases, just while we're talking about this, would be good to, to bring that back up again.
Sure.
I'm not sure where my copy is, but I mean, there were some like cool ideas that I think that we could revisit on there to address these needs again, potentially.
I can put this in this week's Friday letter and get that back out to you.
Thank you. Thank you for this as well. We have a lot to figure out.
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I think.
Great job, Kathy. Even though it's a tough job.
Not the fun. Not the fun.
Suzanne, do you need a motion?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Alex, did you have anything else to do on it? No, okay. I just haven't gone on it. So yes, we would need.
All right. I will move that the board approve the second interim report and related budget revisions, certifying that the district will be able to meet its financial obligations for the 2019-20 fiscal year and subsequent 2 fiscal years.
Great. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-0. Then we are now on P2, approval of process to appoint new members to the Citizens Oversight Committee for Measure M.
So this is presented to you. As you may remember, the Measure M committee recognizes that 4 members may be rolling off in November of this year. They are down to 7, which is the minimum that's required according to the bylaws there, but they were hoping to replace 2 before then, just in case any of the current members don't continue on. Mm-hmm. So they thought it was a good idea to bring on folks for an extra meeting in advance so there could be a little mentoring, if you will. So we may be back after November time and asking for more members there, just depending upon the decisions that people make between now and then. But for this point, this is the Measure M committee asking the board to please approve a process so they can add members. This process as listed here is exactly what we did right when I started. So I came right in on this one, and so it's the same process proposed.
And we've been using this process now for what, 3-4 years?
3 years.
We developed that while Linda and I were on the board, and we've been using it. I think it's been successful. Do you have any thoughts, Linda, to make it any different?
No, I think this will be fine. I think it's worked well for us, worked more seamlessly than I thought it was going to.
Right.
So I think we should just keep with it and hopefully look forward to having some great applicants.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything regarding the application process?
I guess sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Rick, you're next in line, buddy.
So reacting to some of the commentary on, around the bond measure, I do think that we're very good at publicizing things to our school community, but we're not that good at publicizing things to the community that's outside of the school community. And I'm not a fan of Nextdoor, so I don't know if people want to post, something on, even if there's a way to post on Nextdoor. But is there a better way to reach the non-school community, who are still members of the community, and actually I think are specified in the original charter to have
right.
as a community member up here?
So we're submitting a release to the Daily Breeze and the TV News. We just need to follow up with them to make sure they actually run it somewhere.
But that's,
that helps. That helps some. I mean, that's who your target audience is, and that's because school districts can't have accounts on Nextdoor, whether they would want to or not is a separate special meeting we'd have to have. But if there are ways to reach the general community that anybody has, aside from that, would be great to be able to send a release out, because you want a broad spectrum of people. I don't know if that means like homeowners associations or neighborhood watch groups or anything like that. If we have groups that are easy where you can just email the leaders and say, please send this on to your members, to me that would be a great way to reach people in a sort of equitable way, as long as we're not only doing one neighborhood or something, that we're really trying to cover the whole.
I was going to say, because if you do the Council of Homeowners Associations in Rancho PV, you're only going to catch Rancho PV. There is no homeowners association for the entire peninsula that I know of. I do want to mention on Nextdoor, the city of Rancho PV does have a account they post to it. When I had tried to post to Nextdoor to try to get information out during the Measure PV, I was kicked off repeatedly because they thought it was my business. And no matter what I said, they thought it was my business, even though I don't do this for a living, right? So it is not that easy to really be proactive on some of those sites. My personal Facebook page, I post things all the time, right? I'm not sure how wide that gets. I do think as we're more digital, we do have to figure out ways to get the message to people in ways that they listen. I don't know how much the Daily Breeze helps us anymore. So I do think we need to think through how, because most people that applied for all of the past committees, BAC, FAC, we didn't know most of those people every single time.
We have members who aren't parents on both
Right.
those groups who've been amazing members.
So I don't know how they
Ask them-
found it. But
Well, the last time this was done, it was advertised just before I started working here, so I can't speak to what measures were there.
Okay.
But we had plenty of applications.
Right.
But what I think is if we added like the chambers of commerce and the cities and say, would you mind posting this?
Okay, I
where
think
we
that
have-
would be
I have
great.
no problem with that.
I think the homeowners associations are good.
many as we have, yeah.
There are the Nana Bay and Malaga Cove ones I know in PV, for example.
Yeah, no problem.
Rolling Hills, I think the whole city is one giant one, I think. I don't know.
That's probably true.
yeah.
Maybe we could ask the 4 city councils to help publicize it.
Yeah, I mean, whatever we can do, however, we can help get information to people. But we have had no problem getting applicants for any of the recent committees. So people are hearing, but we obviously want to get a very wide, group of people to consider it. So is there anything else?
Before we appoint more members, I would like us to address our conflict of interest policy so that anybody coming on, they understand exactly what our conflict of interest policy is.
Okay, so are you saying you want to not approve this tonight? You want to add a conflict of interest policy? You want to make sure they understand the current one that we have? What exactly are you saying?
Well, I want to, at least one of the things that I believe is agendized in our parking lot is a conflict of interest policy. And I think that I would appreciate doing that before approving the addition of more members to committees.
So we do have a draft of a code of ethics that we could bring to the board for board-appointed committees.
Okay.
This draft is from what we've seen on previous citizens oversight committees.
Okay.
So we could do that if that's the direction of the board.
But if we do that, people who are currently on our boards would have to agree to follow it or resign, no?
Or it would simply be any new members, right? When you are appointed, you now sign this, right? That's up to the board to decide. It doesn't mean you have to make it retroactive to everybody who's on a committee, but you can say any new member must sign this.
So another thing is some of the cities require Form 700 not just from the electeds, but their committee reps. And so we haven't decided that, but we could put in the solicitation for applications that we may ask, that we might actually ask them to file a Form 700, which is a level of disclosure that some people may or may not be, or we could ask them if they're willing to file a Form 700, because that's a level of disclosure that some people may or may not be willing to do, which we're all subject to.
We have to do it, but it's a public document. It takes some effort.
So without revisiting the board policy tonight, because that one hasn't been agendized,
Right.
you could amend the application to add in a statement that you may be required to file a Form 700.
Or ask them to indicate if they're willing to file a Form 700.
We could ask that question.
Correct.
Right.
I'd be willing to approve this as long as we mention that we will be adding a conflict of interest policy that any new member will have to sign.
Well, we haven't made that decision, right?
He said
board
May.
may be considering.
Right. I think May is good.
I said May.
Right. That's fine. Right. And then I think we need to have that on our next, Alex, on our next agenda.
Should we table this item and bring it back?
No, I don't want to table and bring it back. I want to do it now. I want to say, but I want to also get the code of ethics that you mentioned agendized, because I don't know that we'll have to make the decision at that point if we go that direction, if we will ask only new appointees, if we'll ask everybody who's already sitting and doing it, and also if we want to include the Form 700 and see how our cities are utilizing that. I think that's fair.
Understood. We'll bring it back to the next meeting.
Okay.
So
Keith has
so
the
that's
two.
that part of it, and then are you asking me to write in something on the application such as the board may consider a revised code of ethics? Would you be willing to file a Form 700 if selected for this committee?
I think they're two different things. The board may be considering, and then
Okay, so
also
two separate sentences.
two separate things.
So we'll bring back both to the
I
next
think you
meeting.
can move forward with the apps.
Yeah.
With
Adding
that
those words.
Add
Okay.
that sentence of the disclaimer.
You may be,
on
you may
a
be
potential-
required to sign a conflict of interest policy, and you may be required to fill out a Form 700.
In the
No,
future.
we just want to know if they would, right? So that's a straightforward question. Are you willing to do it? Yes or no?
Well, no, we can't ask them if they're willing to do it. We didn't tell them what it entails yet. We have to
Well,
say
the
you
Form
might
seven-
be.
the
Form
Form
700 is different than
Right,
the
right, right,
conflict
right.
of
So if
interest.
you say you may be required, that's,
No,
that's
we're
very
not
similar
saying
to
that.
saying
We're
willing.
asking. We're not saying you may be required. We're asking, are you willing to file a Form 700 or not? Yes or no?
But are we going to use that as a criteria now when we didn't use it in the past?
Don't know. I mean, we can talk about that.
You can use a
No,
point
no.
of reference.
Well, at this point, then I want to table this. I don't think that we are aligned enough in what we expect out of our committee members to move
Well,
forward. on
I mean,
this.
I think that there's a big difference in the conflict of interest concerns around this committee versus what was potential COC on the bond committee. Because, this committee is just making sure that the money is spent in accordance with the priorities that they set, right? And the priorities right now being, so much on teachers, so much on STEM things. It's not on, was this contract to a particular individual in accordance with our policy. So to me, there's just a whole different level of.
I can understand that there's a difference, right? But I don't think it's a bad idea for the district to have a policy that all committee members.
Don't disagree, but I don't think there's any reason to hold
But I also
this
don't see.
up.
I don't see the urgency here to approve this tonight when they're not saying that
Because
they
they're
are
short.
Because they asked us to do it.
Right, and they're
Right,
short.
but waiting 2 weeks.
Well, we're not going to get this resolved in 2 weeks. That's the problem.
Wait, why don't, okay.
We're just not.
Why don't I
So-
do this? I want to make a motion that the board approve this application as amended with that simple question, would you sign a Form 700? And then we'll just take it from there. How about that?
Second.
Okay. Any further comment?
Yes, my recommendation would be to table this. If at least give us 2 weeks to bring back conflict of interest policy that would be included in potentially anybody becoming a member would have to sign this, right? So why not include that in the application, give them all the information?
Well, we can, but I feel like if we're going to ask anyone new to sign that, then we're going to ask every single sitting person to do the same thing. I don't think you would have, I just think it's odd. So maybe, I actually think it's going to be a more complicated conversation than you think, but I like to respond when our committees ask us to do something. I think it's great that we're responsive and do it, right? So they asked to have this agendized, so that's why it's on the
And it
agenda.
was agendized, and we discussed it. I mean,
Right. So we can ask our committees if they want to provide input to us also in this area, but I see the Form 700 is a different issue than a code of conduct issue / conflict of interest. So Dr. Chernus has asked that we, did you say table it? Is that what you said? Table it? Yeah. So we have a motion, a first and a second.
I have a question.
So I don't think we can table it. Yeah.
Am I allowed to ask?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
We're having a conversation.
When this goes out, how long do we normally wait, I guess, to get a set of applications before?
So mine is not pulling up right now, and I did everything electronically, so I see what we put on the application in terms of dates, but I believe I've got dates on there.
Oh, when it's due?
Right.
Yeah, no, you did. I thought it was April something or other.
Right. Because the whole idea is to get new members approved by this board at the April 22nd meeting so that they can take part in
March 31st.
March 31st, okay.
Okay. So they can take part in the May Measure M committee meeting, because they don't meet over the summer.
Right, but this is to fill potential people before, when again?
Before their May meeting, which is, I always forget it, first or second week of the month.
For their, May.
Okay, because they won't meet over the summer.
So, in my view, moving forward, we're in no worse place than we are currently, right? So if there hadn't been anything, we would have just gone ahead and reappointed. By adding the Form 700 question, we, raise that as a possibility for us to act on, and we know whether or not people are willing, and we can figure that out when we, appoint them, whether or not we want to ask them to do that, and we can do that. But certainly we're better off in terms of moving forward and getting people in place than we would be, without having that discussion on conflict of interest in Form 700. And I don't see really the point in delaying it, especially, for this committee. I don't see it as a huge issue, like I said, as I would have seen it for the Oversight Committee for Measure PV.
Right, so you're saying if we add the Form 700 question, as is proposed in the motion, then a person can still apply and say, no, I'm not going to fill out Form 700 if you pick me. I think that's not bad. We get a sense that people are really not willing to do that if they go and look at it and say, no, I'm not going to give that kind of personal information. And I think that's not it's kind of a test to see where we're going. And then I think we need to bring back conflict of interest. And I think it needs to be addressed to all of our committees going forward, not just
You're
this
saying
one.
just to add the 700 and not even mention the conflict of interest policy?
No, the motion had both.
No, did it? And the motion
No,
only
the
had
motion did
Form
not.
700.
I didn't have that because we don't have it yet. So in wanting to get this passed tonight, I can't add an amendment of something that we don't have yet, if that makes sense. So I just thought we could at least ask this question and then we could, my thought would be to address any conflict of interest issues with the whole sitting committee altogether, if that's the board's desire. But there's no way to no way to approve this with a policy that we don't have.
Well, and also the COI policy wouldn't be just this committee. Really, it would be all our committees, right? That we'd want to apply it to.
I think that's
I guess where I'm kind of coming from is I don't think we should shut down our whole committee process while we develop a conflict of interest policy, even though I think it's a good idea to develop a conflict of interest.
And I'm looking that you have 7 of 9, so you have enough members. They're saying that they want to have more members in the event that they lose some. Did I misunderstand?
Well, that in November, their terms will be up, and this is only a group that meets quarterly or 3 or 4 times
so
a year.
we're talking about one meeting, May, right? And I'm talking about something that's much more significant, which is a conflict of interest policy for our district. So you guys do what you want to do. I'm voting no.
Well, okay. I think the conflict of interest policy should not just be specific to these people that apply for this committee.
It should be for
It needs to be
every
for
committee.
all committees, and we need to decide that it's going to be for all, not just for new members of a committee.
Right, and I think that's a conversation that we would have plenty of time over the next few months to accomplish, with the only drawback is this committee loses their May meeting from having 2 new people and sitting on there. So
Fair. However, I've learned that some things take a lot longer to get done than we think. So, all right, there is a motion and there's a second. Let's go ahead and you want to remember, everyone remembers what the motion was. It was to approve this with the Form 700 as a question. Are you willing to complete Form 700 if you are chosen?
If you're selected to
be on the committee, yeah.
Sorry, I have a question. I'm just a little confused. So, yeah, Matt, so that I understand your point, you're saying that to table this to the next meeting to bring back that draft.
the language that would be included that Alex could provide, this is simply the language that will be included.
Then attaching that to this form.
Correct.
right, that new people would have to sign,
Right.
then
We can, as a district, decide what we want to do retroactively with everybody else. But anybody coming into the district knows that we have a conflict of interest policy, and that this is the language that they need to be okay with.
right.
We actually do have a conflict of interest policy. It just it's focused on the board members.
Right, but we're talking about community, right? So we can transpose that. Alex said he had language. I'm saying we wait 2 weeks, and I don't see where the harm in waiting 2 weeks is.
And then in the future, like you said, then retroactively.
We can,
going
as a
back to
policy, we can, as a board, come up with a very specific policy that will then go retroactive if that's what the board so chooses.
Got it.
But anybody new coming on, I think, should be aware that they are going to be required to sign a conflict of interest policy.
And Dr. Turnus, do you think that that would be possible to have that language at the next meeting?
Yes.
So expand on that. You think you can have the language for the conflict of interest. You're going to bring it to the next meeting, and we're all going to like it so much that we make no changes that we're going to approve it.
I can't say that. I can tell you that we have language that has been adopted by many other districts with regards to a board-appointed committee. And so we have that language. We can tailor it to our district and bring it to the board to be reviewed. Council has also reviewed it, so we can definitely be ready in 2 weeks.
Okay, so if we agendized that conflict of interest policy that would pertain to our volunteer oversight committees, and we had it before the agenda, and that we had this on that same agenda after, then you could add that policy that we just approved onto this pending that we actually approved it.
That'd be my recommendation.
Does that make sense?
Well, usually we don't approve policies on a first reading, right? We usually go.
Well, it's a first read policy, so it'd be different.
We go through two. The last time we actually talked about conflict of it, I was on the board with the old board, and it was not just partly because of me. I had multiple issues on.
Of course
on
you
it,
did,
right? Because it was just basically what the county recommended. So I don't think it is as simple a discussion.
Well, I would recommend that we give it a chance, and then if it doesn't, Rick, we're talking 2 weeks here. We're saying
no, but there's no reason that. So okay, so what happens if you do, you don't, right? So whenever you get the conflict of interest policy, we have to decide how it applies anyway to all our committee members, right? Because we shouldn't have two classes of citizens.
Right, that's my issue.
On our committees, those that have agreed and those that haven't. So, I don't have a problem, like I said, moving forward and keeping our committees moving. Especially, as I said, I don't think that there's a huge conflict of interest concern with this committee. I mean, because, for example, one of the things on this committee is how much should go towards teachers, right? Mm-hmm. I believe PVFA has a rep on this committee, right? By the way the committee is designed. Right. Is that a conflict of interest? Potentially, right? And potentially it is, right? Because that says how much goes into the PVFA side. So I think this is a much more complex discussion, and it's not one for this particular committee that is, to me, raises the issue, because it's not about, saying, yes, something to this particular vendor, or to this particular person is a legitimate expenditure or not. It's all about whether the audit, of the funds is appropriate, that I hired the auditors and made sure that the money was being spent in accordance with the measure and in accordance with the direction of the committee. So I just think it's the conflict of interest discussion, I think, is much more subtle than you think. And I don't think it'll be a one meeting thing. And I think we should just go ahead, and this committee will be in the same status as all our other committees.
One other question. So their term expires in November. So their last meeting before summer is May. And then I would assume, would they have one more before November, or is that
September, right? Yeah. So we have a September, November, January, and May. February, at least this year.
So then hypothetically, right, there would be 2 more meetings before someone potentially terms out, right? Okay.
Okay, so Dr. Chernus, regardless, I'd like you to bring the conflict of interest / code of conduct next to the next board meeting. And we're going to have to agendize the wording on that. And then we're going to have to agendize how we actually are going to utilize that. Okay, so I think we've had a lot of discussion on this item. Let's go. We have a motion. We have a first and a second. Let's go ahead and take a roll call vote on this motion. Start with Matt.
No.
Megan?
No.
Suzanne? Oh, do I have to go last? Doesn't matter. Me? Suzanne? Yes.
Yes.
Rick? Linda? Yes. Okay, so that motion carries 3-2.
3-2-0.
What?
3-2-0.
Oh, 3-2-0. No, none abstaining. Okay, thank you. Moving right along. P3, approval of California School Board's gamut service agreement.
We're looking at each other because Trent didn't set us up on this one.
Okay, so
because Trent's
bring
sick.
it on
I'm
and
sorry.
we'll figure it
Our
out as you're
deputy
going.
superintendent is sick and he did not come to work. Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, so you have before you a renewal.
Oh my God.
right, and you know, I guess I'm in the tabling mood because they are updating their. They're going from these multiple applications that we have to a central cloud-based, gamut meetings and so forth. And I'm not sure if Trent has actually tried out the new program that they are migrating towards.
I'd actually be okay tabling it just so Trent can speak to it because I know he did some homework on this.
There's no urgency right
I think
now.
we're fine on urgency.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All in favor of tabling?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. Okay. Acceptance of gifts.
Well, thank you. Let's say 31,000, if I'm remembering correctly, in gifts this time around. And thank you to the PTSAs, PTAs, and boosters, and the Wu family for their generous donation. Thank you, everybody who continues to support our students and make our schools as special as they can be.
Okay, thank you. Are you making a motion?
I move that we approve P4, acceptance of gifts.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-0. All right, now we move on to the consent calendar. Oops, sorry. Okay, so on the consent calendar, can I get a motion for everything but Q2D?
Excuse me, let's see if anybody wants to pull.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I figured no one did. I was moving right ahead here. Would anyone like to pull anything off of consent? No. Okay. So we just have the Q2D, which is a
I'll move approval of Q1A through Q2C and Q3A through Q3C.
Okay, great. Do we have a second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And let's see. So back to, let's see, the warrant. Why do I have such a hard time tonight with my thing?
Future. Yeah, additional agenda items. You have the
Yeah.
whole parking lot list.
It's a very long list. Do we want to add anything to that? Does anyone on the board have anything they want to add to the future agenda items? We have conflict of interest coming back next meeting, FYI.
So I do have one, but it's kind of stimulated by the topic du jour. But I don't want it to interfere with the topic du jour. But we ought to talk about online classes and not for the emergency things, but in terms of in general how our policies are towards online classes.
Okay. And also, there are some that we'd like to take off that we believe we've either covered or will cover. So the gifts for absences, Board Member Brock brought up, we confirmed that we're not asking for them. We actually had some sites that still had old phone messages that included it. So it's all cleaned up. So with your permission, we can take that off the list.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I ask us to hang on? I skipped something. We got to go backwards. I'm just sorry. Dr. Horvath had something on the consent, and I blew right by him, didn't look up. So sorry.
It's quite all right. He's been waiting patiently. So
know.
on the
Hours.
personnel assignment order,
This
we've
man-
done this differently in ways. And one of the things that on the personnel assignment order was our new director of maintenance and operations.
Oh, he's right there too.
That we
I've
were
been
able to
looking
meet
at
in
him all
closed session, but he was our recommendation, and you just approved it through the consent calendar. And Jim Fahey just real quickly comes to us with a plethora of experience as director of M&O in Beverly Hills, San Marino, LA County, La Habra School District, and it's just tons and tons of experience. So we're really, really excited for Mr. Jim Fahey. We ask that he come say a few words, and certainly if anybody else has any words about Mr. Fahey, please go for it.
You like your unceremonious approval. Well, we promise to treat you better in the future.
I appreciate it. No, just excited to get started. I'll be starting Monday, correct? And excited to get to see all the schools. Actually, I've done some new construction when I first was in the carpenter and building trades. I worked on 2 developments up here, so it'll be interesting and fun to be working with the school systems.
Thank you. Well, I'm really sorry that we didn't call you up earlier. We've had 3 meetings in the last 2 days, and clearly I'm slightly distracted. I have so many pieces of paper. I need to file them all away. So that's my fault. I'm so sorry. I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything besides welcome.
Welcome, Jim. Big shoes to fill. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You're following a beloved M&O director, but I know you're going to do a great job. So thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry again for the late night. Okay, sorry about that. So now back to Dr. Chernus. You mentioned that gifts or absences has actually been taken care of. That goes out of the future agenda items list. Was there anything else that budget for reserve fund for facilities, that's actually we were discussing the BAC.
Yes, can we remove that, or should we keep that on until we come to an agreement on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's nothing else I'm looking real quickly. Nothing else you've made progress on yet.
So what's the plan here? Is it to take one per, in
No.
terms of whittling this down?
No, we're just trying to keep an ongoing list so it's easier for all of us to know what we've already mentioned, what we know we have to work on.
And I do think that as we plan agendas, if we have a relatively light agenda, we pick off a few of these if they're discussion items.
I tried to plan for tonight's meeting to end around 9. I'm a little late, but trying to be reasonable on how long these meetings last. Of course, today we started at 3, so you didn't say you wanted to start late and end on time. No, we started a few hours early, so can't have it all. All right, so I think we're good there. Did anybody say they wanted to add anything?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I love committees so much. How about a communications committee that involves members of our community who would then be able to communicate our messaging out with the rest of the community? So whether it's social media, it could be foreign language, working together with, the Japanese Parents Association, Korean Parents Association, making sure that all of our parents are receiving the same information in a format that is readily available to them.
Okay, you can put that as a feature agenda item, no problem. Anybody else? Okay, so very good. Now, reports of board members. Let's start with Ms. Reed.
It's been a busy week. Thank you to all the staff. I really appreciate all of your work. I wanted to talk a little bit about Measure PV just before it gets away from us as we jump into the next big thing, because there's always one big thing to the next. I have some thank yous, and I just have a couple things I want everyone to think about just for the next couple of minutes. I want to thank all of our principals who really stepped up and did a great job. Our classified employees as well. Tina Pierce at Lunada Bay Elementary School was a big supporter. and helped us a lot, as well as our custodians who had a lot of extra duty on our campuses that were voting sites, all 6 of them. Measure PV, there's a lot going on at the state level, obviously, if you look at the passage rates and op-ed columns from journalism sources at both ends of the political spectrum. But in our community, I was really shocked at the levels of nastiness and lies that were out there in the public. And I started to think a lot about why that was the case. And in so many Southern California communities, bond measures like this failed at the same rates as ours, but without opposition that didn't obey laws or any sense of decorum or even any opposition at all. They still kind of failed at the same rate. So I kept thinking, why is it like that here? Why are people so nasty? And the gentleman that spoke tonight, who was a great ambassador for Nextdoor, actually, because he spoke very politely and eloquently about some of his concerns. And he said he had a group of 100 people. And I thought, gosh, none of them would talk to me. And why is that? And why, when we tried different ways and our own personal ways of engaging community, whether you were hosting, meeting people for coffees, whether you were posting on Nextdoor, whether you were saying, please, I'll talk to you anytime, and why that just didn't seem to be that effective. And I was thinking about going back about 5 years or so when our community started down this path of not being polite to each other and a path of misdirection that kind of coincided with the startup of Negative Door, my favorite website. And much of it began with people who were opposed to Common Core and who began to distrust our schools and our government in general. And for the sake of transparency, I was definitely one of those people, and that's why I'm on this board right now. And so I feel like I bear a little bit of responsibility as well. And a lot of this movement was spearheaded by a former school board member named Joan Davidson, who's very smart, and she decided to start posting some incorrect information on Nextdoor and filed a lot of public records requests, some that had a lot of merit and some that didn't, and were kind of frivolous. And while she wasn't involved in this election, I felt like the people with whom she did this work originally and who she taught how to do this stuff and how to use social media without accountability, I felt like those were the people that kind of rose to the top in this community. Everybody knows their names now, and as a board and community leaders, we have a responsibility here. 3 of us were supported in our election campaigns by Mrs. Davidson and her crew as candidates to varying degrees, and looked the other way perhaps when she broke rules and laws and protocols to support your candidacy. And so, of course, once elected and the nastiness kind of is directed at all of us, we feel really differently about how that behavior is. And so I think as board members, we've done a great job of encouraging the public to be polite to each other. We're trying to set good examples, and I think we've done a good job. But maybe we need to encourage the public to self-quarantine itself from social media that doesn't require accountability. And rumors spread irresponsibly. We've seen it about the COVID-19 stuff this week. People post stuff all the time, but they don't call and ask. Don't post something saying a school is closing. Call the school office and ask. And they haven't done that because people don't want to engage directly with each other. And many people have asked me over the last week or two, particularly after the measure failed, who are these people that are opposed to our schools? And my answer is that the donors to this group, called Citizens for Whatever Against Children, or whatever they're called, is publicly available information through the LA County election offices in Norwalk. You can look and see who donated to the No campaign. Many of them are former and current parents in the district: Desiree Myers, Jeffrey Axtell, Michelle Bielke. There's a whole group of people. And perhaps our community members can ask them and reach out in civil, polite conversations why they financially supported the opposition. The gentleman who spoke tonight perhaps could be a great conduit because he did a great job. On the flip side, there are many people to thank. I want to publicly thank Rolling Hills Estate City Council members Velvish Schmidt and Steve Zuckerman, PVE City Council members Sandy Davidson, Kenny Coe, and Dave McGowan, and RPV City Council members Eric Alegria, Barbara Ferraro, and David Bradley for their support. I want to thank all the brave souls who spoke out and were victims of bullying and social media in our community: Amy Friedman, Heather Matson, Len Lye, who spoke tonight, Jean Christian, Tasman Curtis, among others. And finally, I really want to thank our volunteer Yes on PV committee: Howard Edelson, Brett Egan, Steve Woolman, who is the webmaster, did a fantastic job. He had a huge job. Bernd Halschild, the treasurer, whose work continues and will continue for many months, and Amy Roach, and 3 ladies in particular who work their tails off for our community night and day, from 6 in the morning till late at night, PTA leaders Beth Meyerhoff and Betty Lynn Peterson, my hat is off to you. You're incredible women. And a final biggest thank you to former PEF President Roma Mystery, who took on the huge job of fundraising chair. It was a lot of work. She and I both joke about how many friends we've lost over the last few months. And when you're having to ask people for money, it's very challenging. And when that part of the campaign was over, she did a lot of work on mobilizing and positive social media posts. These are the people who make our community work, and they deserve our gratitude. And as one board member, I'm certainly very, very grateful to all of you people, and you inspire me and will continue to inspire our work going forward. That's all I have tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. And Rick?
Tough act to follow.
Yeah.
But I'd like to really echo Linda's thanks to all the people that really advocated on behalf of the kids in schools and the passage of Measure PV. As a financial guy, I find it sad that the community has actually missed the opportunity to lock in historically low interest rates to finance the projects in the schools. And that's a fact. We literally have missed that opportunity. And I do think that, I don't think anybody in local politics understands the proper way to deal with negative door. But it certainly hasn't been a medium conducive to the constructive passage of any local measure that I'm aware of since it really became a force on the scene. And I've been involved in not only my own election, but in terms of the Measure D and E campaigns within the city of PVE and now Measure PV. And I think that it's something to think about what the right way to do that is. But I do think it unfortunately, and I think even the speaker raised it tonight, is one of the issues that it raised is that there still are some trust issues in this district, and that we need to work extra hard as board members and as the new leadership of the district to restore that trust, so that we have a trusting relationship with the community and good communications. I do think some of my comments today are, how can we do a better job in interfacing and communicating with the non-school community? Because that's one of the things that I heard was that people claimed that they were blindsided because nobody knew about it until a Measure PV line sign went up. But in fact, we'd actually passed things actually a month early, which gave the opposition theoretically a month extra to actually put things, in a con argument in the ballot measure, for example. But I do think that we could do a better job of communicating with the entire school district community, including those many people who don't have kids actively in the schools. And I look forward to rebuilding bridges, because I do think we need to be a community that works on all our issues together. I think right now we're faced with a crisis, in the community that's going to require everybody's support to get through it, and it is going to, impact all of our lives, I think, in terms of how we behave over the next couple of months. So with that, I'm still holding my coffees with a school board member, although I'll ask you to stay 6 feet away, I guess, when you're asking your questions now, or 3.5 feet. But the next one will be March 22nd at Malaga Cove Yellow Vase. But
maybe you can be there and everybody else can be at Malaga Ridge Market.
There you go. But yeah, and actually, I will say that even during next door, there was not during next door, during Measure PV, other than the one where I held a special one just for Measure PV, which had a lot of the negative door crowd attend, there really wasn't, many people that had questions, and I didn't get any feedback in my last one on Measure PV, except for one who couldn't make it, and I followed up with by phone afterwards. So appreciate that, and I guess also did have the opportunity to visit Rancho Del Mar and Monte Malaga, and thank Jody and Rick for hosting me there, and there's good things going on at all our sites, and I think that's why I do the job, is it lets me get to the schools more, and especially when you can go to an elementary school and see, those kindergarten, first grade kids, it's hard to have a bad day.
Very true.
Thank you. Okay, and Matt?
Yeah, so first, I just want to talk about Joan Davidson. She did support my campaign and I believe she's supported other members here on the board. I have found her to have a very good heart, and she tries extremely hard to make the lives better of the people around her. Now, sometimes people might not agree with how she's doing that, but her heart comes from the right place. Recently, she wanted to thank one of the police officers at our intermediate schools. So she bought lunch for all the teachers, balloons, worked with it to, simply to thank this police officer for being there for our students. So I can't sit idly as she's attacked up here on the dais, because she does a lot of good for this community. And I understand that you have a visceral reaction to her. That's fine. That's between you and her. But I find it important to state that she has actually done a lot of good things for the district. Even on this measure behind the scenes, she was helping. So did what she start, did that turn into something that other people took and ran with? Sure. Same way that, happens all the time. But as far as next door, it's easy to say no to taxing yourself. If you have a reason, any good excuse, you're going to go ahead and say no. It's like, nope, I don't trust it, or, oh, it doesn't look right. Right? It's harder to get somebody to say yes. And we did run into some issues, and some of those were, I will take responsibility for. I recommended to the board that we did not do a full assessment prior to the bond being passed. And my rationale was, to do that, we would have had to have spent all that money before the board itself even approved whether or not we want to go out for resolution. Because once the board approved the resolution to go out, we could not spend any more money. And I think that's something that the community does not understand, is that, it's like, well, why wasn't the district communicating? Why weren't they saying things? Because we couldn't, right? We could go out and we could speak on our own behalf. We could speak somewhat as board members, but the district could not send out information. We were precluded to by law, because we were not allowed to spend any money once we went out for approval. So the people, there are a lot of people out there, they had, if I wasn't in complete disagreement with their frustration over some of the things. And the only difference is, sitting up here, I know why we had to do it that way. And I wish that they would have taken the time to understand why we had to do it that way, rather than rushing to the conclusion that we were inept, that we were colluding, that we were corrupt, that we were profiting. I don't know about you guys, but I got a 100% raise on this, right? 100% of zero is still zero. So these are volunteer positions, right? And everybody up here is doing what they truly believe is best for students. And I can respect that people have different opinions, but to everybody else's point, it's how you express those opinions that is so important. Are you attacking, or are you trying to inspire? Are you trying to educate? Are you trying to shift the needle, or are you simply listening to yourself talk? And I think that's, again, I want to keep the dialogue open with anybody who was against it. They all are still valuable members of our community, and they've expressed interest in supporting us, or serving on committees, and I think that we should look at that, right? It's totally different. As a candidate, you're running, and you're like, oh, the school board did this and they did that, and that's stupid, right? And you get up here and go, oh, yeah, okay, I still don't like it, but I can see why. So I invite these people who are so critical of the district to spend a little bit of time coming down, watching the board meetings, seeing actually what goes on, as opposed to saying, they don't know what they're doing. That's it.
Okay. Megan.
Tough acts to follow. So I guess just to add on to the Measure PV outcome, it's obviously disappointing. Like Rick stated, I think that our community missed a big opportunity to give much needed funding to our school sites. And again, seeing the outcome too for like the rest of the state, majority of bonds didn't pass in the state. That was disheartening to see as well. So think there's a disconnect. Some people are saying no more taxes and enough is enough, and we need to have funding come from California. And I agree with them that we need more funding from California. But at the end of the day, we're not getting it. So, the main solution that we came up with was the measure, and it didn't pass. So now what? Now what are we going to do? Now we have a lot of hard decisions to make. And I agree with Matt, your recommendation of a communications committee. I think that can be looked at. And Rick, you stating to have more communication with the cities in general and school district community, not just people who have kids in the district, because we do have a lot of people that live here that don't have kids and potentially not even grandchildren who live here, and they need to be included with our communications. And I think that that needs to be expanded in the future for things that we are doing so that everyone can be informed and not feel this shock of not knowing. Even though we did talk about it for a while and we had meetings to discuss and had the facilities advisory committee and all of those things, if, part of it is like people aren't putting the time in to watch, right? So telling people to come to a meeting or watch, but then like Trent saying, like our average views is like 30 people that are watching. So it's like people have to put the time in to get knowledge and not just make up all these things and not spread misinformation. So I think it's on them, but I think it's also on us to expand our information to the broader community, not just parents. So I think that will be good. Looking forward in doing that. And like Linda said, I appreciate all the time from the volunteers who put in all of that effort, who did a great job. And now we have to figure out what to do. And I do encourage people who voted no to contact me with any feedback that you have. And if you have any ideas on how to get money to help our facilities, that was our one big way for money. So if you have a better idea, I would love to hear it so we can try to incorporate that. Like Matt said, you're still part of our community. So again, feel free to email or reach out in some way. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Megan. Okay, well, for me, number one, it's not too late to get a flu shot. So if you don't have a flu shot, it's not too late to get a flu shot, really. It would be good. So that's number one. Number two, the frustration, I feel from all my fellow board members. I get it. I get that we all spent, including all the people who volunteered, hundreds of hours and made it our entire life's work. And it's tough because it just, feels like it's down the drain. And for those who said that, it came out of nowhere. And Linda got on the Board of Education, has been talking about a bond measure since the minute she was elected. And Tony mentioned it when he was president over and over. So it is really frustrating that it takes work to be part of a democracy and that it takes a lot of effort to stay abreast of what's going on, even when you don't think it's important to you, because every meeting is a building block. Tonight, we had a talk about numerous things. We're going to come back to the next meeting with multiple things that we're going to address that came up tonight, like our conflict of interest policy, right? So I get it if you watch a small slice of anything, you think it's just that thing. But honestly, there's a method of the madness. We have obviously a ton of work to do, and nothing happens that quickly. So I really don't disagree with anything that people have said up here tonight. Education funding in California is broken. Period. End of story. The state is broken. Taxes are broken. Funding for education and other vital services are broken. I don't know when we're going to fix that. We advocate for it. We talk to the people in Sacramento about it, but we only can do what we can do with what we have. So was told so many times, why don't you just go to Sacramento and explain you need more money? Like, okay, we've done that. And we'll keep doing that, like that would be like a no-brainer rolling out of bed. So I do think it's important people understand that, we have multiple, things going on all of the time. beyond the measure PV not passing, I think one of the saddest things is so many people that really supported me didn't trust me in this issue. And they didn't even come to me necessarily with their trust issues. I read about them other places. And that is amazing to me, given that I absolutely post my website, my phone number, my email. People reach out to me all the time, and I actually respond to every phone call. I respond to every email. I meet with every single person that asks. Yet, I have read multiple places that people will ask things about what I have said or want to do or don't do, but they don't come to me directly. So that is really a problem. And I will maintain the really the same level of engagement all of you do, that if anybody calls, anybody writes, anybody that wants to engage, we are available for all of those conversations. And it was my intention to reach out to some of the people that were very adamant about the No campaign, to ask them what I can do to help them get to a place where we can, as a community, approve a bond. Because we're going to have to do it at some point, and although it looks like it's super easy to do this, the knowledge that it takes to get something on a ballot is enormous. And whatever I can do, whether I'm on this board or not, I'm happy to help whatever that group is get to the place, because we do need to fix our schools. Period. End of story. We're always going to have kids in the school district. I hope we always support public education, and I will do whatever I can, if people think it's useful, to provide that, to provide the knowledge that I've learned for the last 5 years here, and 15 plus as a parent in the district. So I look forward to our next board meeting, Dr. Chernus, and I will try to keep it to 9 o'clock. No guarantees. We have a lot going on.
Does it really say 9:40?
Yeah, it does. So with that, meeting is adjourned.